Hey everybody, this is Rydo and we're back to another live stream of Shadowverse. Today is Monday, January 4th. Um, it is certainly a little weird to look at this loading screen for Shadowverse and know that this is a Grand Blue Fantasy crossover and know how prominent like these weapons are, and kind of know that unless they add in the card expansion weapons later on, because Shadowverse does that weird thing where they add more cards to the current expansion several weeks after the original launch. This just seems like an odd thing to focus on, even if this is the Grand Blue Fantasy logo or whatever it is. You don't see Grand Blue Fantasy really listed here, but also then you look at these characters, and these characters definitely do look better in the crazy anime high fashion sense, because when you look at like this guy, sure, he has a lot of gold accents, but it's a color palette of basically black and gold, one blue gem in the middle that's small, and then one sword that's a big focus. His hair for an anime guy is pretty much the same. He doesn't have any kind of crazy gauntlets or gloves or anything. It's just all very reasonable and not distracting. In fact, the most distracting thing I would say is the black belts here that seem to cross all around his waist and his thighs. Um, then you look over here, notice that they maybe have a cape, but it's not taking up a ton of the screen. Over here on the girl, she has a bit of a hair decoration and maybe a hood. Same blue gem, so not repeating anything. Chest piece. Definitely they're showing more skin with hot pants and still doing the crazy anime belts, but only two. The boots are pretty much the same as his are. Her sword is very similar in design in the hilt, very similar probably in the blade. Like her gloves, her gauntlets are all very similar. Like it's just not super crazy like the default characters are. And I certainly noticed that, as, and this is where the accountability section will come in, I've been trying to catch up and finish the storyline of the solo storyline, and that has put me to see the new characters in Fate's Trigger, who are still following that idea where they just don't look particularly well designed. And honestly, when you zoom in this way to see the characters, they don't look anywhere as bad as they do when they're on screen. But here you have your standard, almost every character that's drawn by Shadowverse by default has a giant flowing coat of some sort that's floating in the air. You have really overemphasized gauntlets. You have uh, lots of just ridiculous design, and again, it doesn't even look that bad. Like this girl, and I know text is in the way, that's part of the problem, is supposed to be a nun, and she's dressed completely not like anything you would say is a nun. And then I ran into another problem, certainly, in that while this story and this story has been translated to English badly, in my opinion, there is definitely a lack of literal translation if you turn on the Japanese and even know the minimalist amount of Japanese phrases like thank you, I'm sorry, uh, honorifics of like chan and san and sensei, uh, things like that are not being translated, sometimes not being spoken too, even though the characters are speaking Japanese. They have completely rewritten the English subtitles to say different things. In particular, since this is set in a Western world frontier town, they've also thrown in a ridiculous amount of Western jargon that is kind of insane, because it's just in every sentence two or three times. Uh, and they still are running into the exact same problem of these stories being just super long And they became definitely a lot longer once I hit the Japanese and then had to read it out myself, or felt the need to read it out myself. Uh, but yeah, it's definitely not a great experience. But I will commit, I suppose, I'm pot committed now to do 2 more recordings. The final characters part of the story in the setup here, and then the combined characters story in Fate's Trigger conclusion. And then I'll have to remind myself to not cover chapter probably 12 or 13 if when they come out until all of it has been translated to English, because I definitely don't want to end up spending this much time with a non-voice acted visual novel style game. Uh, you can see I had some free time because there was some remade challenges for this guy and this girl, who definitely, which made me play some of the levels a second time, and I got the rewards a second time, but they had changed how the levels played, probably because they'd banned some cards in those. And then there was the final boss battle on this one that I had been sitting on for months, frankly, trying to defeat the final bad guy. And I finally had some free time and put my head to it, and so I finished that. So now we are completely complete on the solo mode, which is great. To just mention the fashion again, it's not really even the greatest point to do it here, but when you look at like the original characters, Orisa is a great example of a big flowing coat, and the flowing skirt concept they've pulled away from now. So people do wear skirts, but they are mostly down, and it was very, very bad for Erica's outfit in particular, because her skirt is just like fully flipped up, trying to be kind of an action pose as this ninja maid concept, ninja maid assassin concept that Erica is, and the hair flowing. They've toned her down a lot, but there's still just a lot of frills, a lot of design. They've, I think, changed Isabel's outfit 2 or 3 times now in the story. They've changed every character's outfit at least once. I think Rowan's outfit was probably the least over the top, since it is just a piece of armor, and you could expect that a piece of armor would be fairly uniquely designed. The only problem there is that they've still not greatly fixed the problem of his spear being clipped on the edge of the art, or the fact that all the men tend to have these super broad shoulders and just really big pecs. But the new characters in that, they've kind of pulled away from that. Luna is one of the worst examples of being overly designed fashion-wise. You see her in this outfit, and in the newest story they show some regular kids, and the regular kids are literally just in Western standard clothes that you'd expect kids to be wearing, which totally does not match this idea that Luna is dressed up for like a tea party or something, or a ball, a ball. But then it still throws in a problem in the newest story, since the newest story has so far not shown me anybody but Orisa. It seems like everybody else has just been eliminated. It creates a problem, though, that the regular kids in the newest story are dressed regularly, but they're being raised by the nun girl I showed you earlier, who is in the crazy anime dress. So it almost creates this like fiction that this is some weird society that once you turn 18 or something, you're handed your crazy anime clothing and say, don't wear those old-fashioned or kids clothes anymore. You would think that if you are going to make the assumption that everybody's wearing crazy high fashion over designed belts and anime design, that the kids also would be wearing some form of that. It would be the equivalent of in the real world if children, like not babies basically do wear completely different designs, but if children ages 10, 11, 12 were all wearing suits and everybody else was wearing jeans and jackets, or no, I guess maybe children were wearing kids' clothes and everybody in the real world was wearing crazy uh, high fashion anime type clothing, it would be the exact same scenario. And that would be very weird. Like, where would the transfer happen there? Um, or Urias hasn't played any part in the story. They've redrawn her completely and changed her staff. Ewan's been redrawn and changed only a little bit. They also, in the main story, are still doing the thing where they flip the characters back and forth. So you'll see Ewan on one side with his spikes, and then they'll just flip the image for no good reason at all to the other side. It just doesn't make any sense. There is a real lack of like logical consistency in the animation. It just feels, I wouldn't even call it lazy. It just feels stupid. It feels like they don't know what they're doing, and instead of learning to be better over the course of the 4+ years that Shadowverse has been happening to do this solo story mode, which honestly the game doesn't even really need it. They've just kind of doubled down on doing the same things over and over again. I may not have very many daily quests because I played a little bit yesterday in the evening, but we are done with these solo extra things. So I can now claim this and claim this. And it is very possible between now and January 31st, I could come in every single day and I could play this guy one more time. But there's no reason to do that. Like, even though the quest missions weren't all done, like, it would just become a point of pride because these points that you would collect won't do anything for you. It'll give you a little bit of resources and that's it. We are slowly making our way through this. There's one last day as far as this goes, but oddly, take note that this ends in like 3 days, so they set this up so that you would pretty much not have to play every single day. And so we can open these chests now. And they've been doing the private games, and I've been somewhat good about doing the private games to get packs too. So we've done the main story, we've done the quests, and we've competed. So on the 7th, these should be handed to us, unless I've made a big mistake. And then overall, we've also been making progress. So I got Dragoncraft to 75, which gets some more animated cards. I got Havencraft to 65. I got Portalcraft to 75, which a lot of this really does go to show that if I had simply done the job that I should have done, which is played more Shadowverse, I would have already ranked a lot of these characters up to those levels. But then you hit a point where it's like get 200 ranked wins as Forestcraft, and that'll certainly take time. And these private matches, I don't know if after that point there are any more challenges for any more private matches, or whether it just keeps going basically forever. That may have been the last of the private matches. I don't know why there are even achievements for doing private matches, frankly. It seems kind of ridiculous. Yeah, it does seem like every private match you're going to get is going to give you 100 gold. I bet this goes all the way up to 100. And so if I was just to put a lot of effort into this, if I have nothing better to do, I should just probably let private matches happen. And it certainly explains now why so many people will volunteer to just play and pass and let the opponent win, is because normally speaking, you don't need to win to be rewarded with the private matches, whereas almost every other mission does require you to win. Yeah, and we won't have any of these unlocked by the end of this stream, so that's fine. That was the trade-off. And sometimes it is just better in life to get your work done early and then be bored than it is to put something off so you can do it at the last second to show off, particularly. It's a bad, that's not a good reason. For the accountability section here, we've got like 15. Let's just open these. Otherwise, I was mostly recording. I've scheduled things up until April about 14th. And so halfway through April will be the beginning of the second Halloween. I desperately need to finish the final season of The Walking Dead Telltale Games so I can just be done with that long-running series. And then I think I might play Hydrophobia. There's possibly some other horror games, or Resident Evil 4. Honestly, Resident Evil 4 does not make sense to be considered a horror game, really. I think playing something new and different makes more sense. I could easily play Resident Evil 4 the next month after April and not feel like I'm doubling up on horror games. Didn't look at the new card. We have Tien, Treacherous Tiger, or Trigger. These new cards seem to be kind of just random. Skybound Art 10, gain +2 in Storm. Super Skybound Art 15, gives Storm to all followers in your hand. Fanfare, draw a card as a 2/4 card. A lot of these cards that are really, really good basically completely replace a different 3/2/4, because there almost certainly is a 3/2/4 character out there that doesn't do anything, or just has fanfare, draw a card, and so there would be no reason to have that in a Portalcraft deck otherwise.
Swifter than prayer, sharper than grief.
And it is a little weird to me that the new card expansion all seems to have English for the cards, but does not have English for the solo mode, although that probably is the right move. This might be new too. It's been a while since I've looked at any new cards, so it'd be kind of hard to tell. I suppose it could have also been smarter to sit on these tickets at the moment. Like, that's where being a little bit more intelligent would certainly help. If I looked and saw that I only have like 4 or 5 of platinum tier cards in the expansion available to me at the moment, or that I haven't collected, it would make sense to say, hey, just sit on these tickets until we get to that mid expansion where they add new cards, and then use the tickets there to better effect. But you really aren't encouraged to play that way by any means, because they definitely seem to really want you to just pour all of your money into card packs now. See, I have all these. I have like temporary cards of almost everything. Interesting. I don't know why I have so many temporary cards, but I think that probably was because I got that one temporary pack. So if I got this expansion to tradables, it would be seemingly very easy to just trade like one of these for this, assuming it's a 1-to-1 trade. And then I'd have at least one of everything. Trade this for this maybe, but probably not. So yeah, the logical thing to do would be to come over here, look at the cards, go to create card mode, then filter yourself down to Eternal, the newest expansion, and just look and see in create card mode how many cards are we really missing, or are we literally just gonna flush our currency down the toilet. Yeah, we're not missing anything in this expansion. We've got everything, and at least one copy of everything. A lot of them are temporary, sure, but that does scream that even opening the last 10 packs that we just did was a mistake. You know, there's not a single grayed out card. Okay, well, I'll learn my lesson there. No more opening of the new expansion until the new expansion expands. And we'll definitely consider getting this up to 400 if we ever get the other expansion to 400. Where's Storm's Arrival? This is the story expansion, card expansion. There's so much guns in it, but they're magic guns, so it doesn't... It's very, very weird, because we haven't seen guns in any of the other instances, any of the other worlds in the main story. But then also they are just shooting people and killing people like crazy. To the point where it creates a situation where it's just ridiculous, where they'll have the same underlings character models appear multiple times, and it just kind of doesn't make sense. I'm willing to do 10 packs today. I'm gonna waste some gold. On this. Now, of course, for this expansion, we pretty much have all the cards, and we are, with the exception of the platinum cards, and we've seen them over and over again. So we are best off just skipping it instead of doing this. Yeah. Let's just go ahead and skip. We'll see what we got new. We got a new platinum here and a new here. Well, not new, but a platinum. We have a new gold card. I'm a little surprised we had room for any new gold cards. And then a bunch of redundant silver and bronze cards, almost certainly. With almost a certainty that everything in this expansion has also hit a level where we've gotten most of the animation ones too. And so then we just liquefy these extras, which takes us from 10 vials to 4,000 vials. And still, as far as creating one of every card of the old cards, we as far as bronze, we still have a lot of work to do there, but I'm not gonna do that. It does occur to me that we have not done any arenas because they haven't really been focused on that, and there's still reward chests to play to get that. What I was wondering though is how many tickets. Let's see, let me remind myself. Pick a pair of cards from 2 present and repeat the process until you have 30 cards. All the cards for take 2 are randomly drawn from the latest 4 card sets plus basic cards. You play a total of 5 matches with the deck you built. The more matches you win, the better you get rewards you get. So Open 6 is the one we are looking for at the moment. Yeah. Because Open 6 lets you open cards. So how many tickets do we have in our hand right now? Right now we have 7 tickets. So we really haven't been earning tickets. Instead, we've been earning card packs. So they definitely have pulled focus away from that. And that makes a lot of sense. I think you could easily get rid of the free ticket concept and just have free entries, or just give gold in general for people who want to do that. There's too many different categories certainly around here. And so you have like 2 challenge modes under arena plus tournament mode. You have multiplayer mode, ranked and unranked, plus private matches. You have main story, sometimes quest, and practice mode. Then there's 2 entire pages here that are somewhat built around getting you to buy more cards, in the fact that you have your cards organization tab, and then you have a shop here that is all about buying cards or buying premium currency to basically buy more cards or to buy skins. It's not particularly the greatest depiction to just have this long bar here. Alright, so what should we do today? Let's just, I guess, play. We'll just play and we'll just try and get some victories. I did come in here and try to make some changes, but I haven't made a ton of changes. Like, it's fairly easy to click on something like this and then say, well, we've got to get rid of that, we've got to get rid of that, got to get rid of that. But I'm not really sure what this card, this deck was about. But let's just assume that it's around Dragoncraft general concepts. So then you click here, and then any cards from Eternal, and then we start to think, well, should we add this? Probably start at the end. The thing about the Eternal cards in particular is that I don't think too many of them are built around anything. If you have 10 play point orbs, subtract 10 from the cost of this card. Okay. Super difficult card to play. Let's see. So we'll just pick some really late game things, and then we'll probably decide to not actually play all these late game things, and really I should just have like one of each card, and then give it a try. And it still definitely does feel like there is a situation here where you probably don't want to just put a bunch of platinum to your cards in your deck if you don't have a concept there. That's not just going to win. And that is good collectible card design, certainly, is you don't want to create a scenario where you are going to win always if you just play the most expensive cards or the most difficult to get cards. I should mention, for the accountability section, I did do a small bit of work on my server, but not a lot. I'm trying a software called SyncThing instead of Unison. Unison will keep 2 computers synchronized, where SyncThing uses more of an encrypted BitTorrent type technology to keep multiple computers synchronized. But the problem is neither one of them seem to be easily set up through a Docker container by default. SyncThing in general does not seem like it lets you tell through a configuration file to computers to automatically be connected without knowing the device IDs of both of the computers, which at that point the whole thing falls apart because they have these unique device IDs instead of just saying, all right, this is the IP address, this is the private key, or this is the password or login. Honestly, SyncThing doesn't seem like it really has any security at all in it. Yeah, and that's a problem, I think, inherently with it. I could almost see the idea of using SyncThing to have a school where a classroom would all share the same folder, and then the teacher would put in that classroom's like daily homework into that folder, and it might be slightly faster, but then at that point the amount of effort and setup to set up and run and maintain SyncThing is not worth it. It's not really a backup solution. It runs into the same problem with a lot of software. The SFTP server also is probably not a backup solution for Windows 10 because it just can't access all the files that it needs to access. But yeah, I don't know if anything really will be a Windows 10 backup solution. I don't know if there is really a backup solution there that doesn't either involve making a full disk image every single time, or partial updates to a full disk image, which is a pain and slow, and does not allow for deduplication, and does not allow for greater compression on the back end of the server's point. So yeah, I'm not sure SyncThing is worth the effort. I think Unison might be the better solution there, just the way it's set up. Which is a shame because in theory you certainly would want, like, particularly in the concept, if you were trying to use Docker containers the way they're designed to be used, where you'd have multiple servers and potentially those multiple servers would all have the same data, that the user's data, and then they would keep that synchronized and in good standing and not changed. Like that would be ideally what you would want, but it seems like that very possibly could take up so much of your bandwidth for no good reason, just communicating back and forth. And even in big projects, I don't know if it isn't just better to have a network drive that's shared by everybody, so there's one central location instead of multiple copies in multiple locations. The cell phone, there is a cell phone Android app for SyncThing, but once again, if you have to have it set up in such a way that you not only have both devices agree to synchronize their data together, but then both devices also have to agree to synchronize specific folders together, there's just not really a good automation there where you can tell somebody to install this app and it will start backing up automatically. There I should have evolved that first. That was a mistake. Yeah, there seems not really to be a great way to even type in the IP address of a server. It seems to want to, by default, just find it on your local network, which then destroys it as far as an easy setup to synchronize over the internet, where at that point that would be where SyncThing might have some possible usefulness. But the concept falls apart fairly quickly, because SyncThing, if it's doing kind of a BitTorrent thing where a small percentage of your data is on multiple computers across the internet, a small percentage of your data is still on multiple computers across the internet, even if they're just caching that data to be assistive. So it would make sense to use something like SyncThing if it was a little bit easier to work out and you were going to, say, synchronize it to something like the Gutenberg project. That makes some sense. Let's give that one more try and then we'll move around. There you have a relatively large amount of data and it's being shared by a lot of different people as far as open source public domain ebooks. But if you just have a private project that was as big as the Gutenberg project, but it's only supposed to be shared by 5 people, it probably doesn't make that much sense to worry about SyncThing. Maybe at that point it does, but if it's a small project, it definitely isn't worth worrying about that. Yeah, there's just no great system there. And that's a shame because frankly it should just be built directly into Docker. If you're gonna run up servers, the concept that there would be volumes that are mounted for persistent data, and those volumes of persistent data might want to be shared between multiple servers. So it's weird that that's not integrated, but then I think that is probably a greater comment on Docker as a container service anyways, is that it just is not as polished as you would like it to be. And maybe that's why a lot of people have potentially moved over. I'm not sure if this is true or not, but it would certainly make a sense that a lot of people have moved over to something like Kubernetes instead.
Get back here.
Like Docker definitely feels like it was the first effort in the idea of making containerized apps, or instead of making virtual machines, which is probably a more standard way of doing things. And I would argue also it's probably more difficult even now to make virtual machines, less efficient and more of a hassle. And then I don't know if I really worked on anything else as far as my server. I did a little bit of research into the idea, since I have an identifier now that will recognize when somebody unplugs like a USB stick or something, and that can mail people. I could very well modify that to log out everybody except the root user, which apparently you shouldn't log out the root user. Otherwise, I assume it will just crash the system completely, which inherently the root user should not be log-inable anyways. But yeah, that is a thing I could do, and then I could definitely monitor to see if anybody logs back in before, after a minute or two, potentially shutting down the computer. I've also found that with Grub 2, it's a slightly different process than Grub 1, with Grub being the GNU Universal Bootloader or whatever. Recovery Universal Bootloader, whatever it is. It's the boot code for Linux. With that, you can password protect a lot of the recovery options, and changing the and the ability to change the boot parameters, which probably doesn't stop everyone from hacking into your computer if without a password, but it does definitely eliminate a way I know to do it. And frankly, I would have to research more after that point. There is unfortunately no direct communication with BIOSes, so you can't tell a BIOS to turn on the BIOS password, which would be more secure. So then you have the inherent trade-off of you can either require a password at boot, and then every time your computer reboots, it won't go any further, which that's not really what I want. I do always want to have a smooth transition into the operating system if the power goes out and the power comes back on. Or you can but yeah, without making that change, you can't really do much of anything else. So I was able, I think I haven't actually rebooted to test that it worked. You could put a password on changing the boot parameters, and that's as good as it's probably going to be to better harden the security on the server. The next step would be to take the stuff into full disk encryption, because it really doesn't stop anybody to access your data if they can just boot off a thumb drive and then mount your hard drive and look at all the data there. So you need full disk encryption, and that's not something I built on the image. A lot of these tweaks certainly also just once again point to the fact that this new Debian version, this new Debian Linux is going to require me to just make a full disk image of it and copy it over, because it's just not going to be worth the effort to do all the little tweaks. For instance, my SSH configuration was a little bit wrong in the fact that it didn't have TCP keep alive signals being sent, so it would just randomly disconnect, and I didn't know why that was happening really. And then it was still accepting passwords when it shouldn't have been accepting passwords. So like, it's kind of pointless to implement security and not disallow the older security login procedures. But yeah, that's pretty much all I did. So I have not been very heavy into messing with the server lately, instead trying to focus on scheduling videos. I do have not even that much, but a decent amount of videos that do need to be scheduled, but I need to record the Halloween stuff and schedule that first, and then I'll put the other content after that, which will put me past April, which is not as far ahead as I'd like to be. I definitely would love to be an entire year ahead. It's not super YouTube video game related, but apparently some, if not all, of the YouTube of the Google employees are trying to unionize, which certainly feels dangerous to me. As much as I've been very, very pro-union, I don't think I've really had much to say bad about unions, other than the fact that if you have a bad union with bad leaders, you can certainly have a bad time. And there definitely are scenarios where, like, police unions in particular tend to so fully embrace the concept of protecting their own employees to the point where they're literally protecting probable or proven criminals, instead of being human beings and being realistic and running their union with more of a realistic concept.
I only did what I had to.
But certainly for YouTube employees or Google employees to unionize definitely makes me wonder. Let's ride this victory, I guess. it definitely makes me wonder if this union fully succeeds, we won't start to see even more censorship, even more SJW-ness, because we kind of know the type of employees that Google has hired. Now, maybe that changes. Like, it isn't too much of an exaggeration, in my opinion, to say that unions tend to bring more salt of the earth common folk into the mix instead of overeducated and underexperienced people, which is what I think SJWs definitely is a great way to describe them. So I could see potentially the requirements for certain jobs being lowered to be a Google employee, thus the requirements, the type of people being hired could change. But that is a lot of sticking your head in the sand and hopefulness. Like, it is very, very possible that if YouTube and Google ever fails, people would be able to make a decent argument that unionization was a big factor in that. On the other hand, let's just see what happens. Like, frankly, at this point, if Google failed, it would suck, and I don't know what I'd do with my videos really, but I'd also be willing to see what happens because Google has just been that terrible. So we didn't play this at all in the last game. This really only plays on the 11th turn, frankly. You either play it on the 10th turn. No, you play it on the 11th turn for 7 mana, or you play it on the 12th turn for free. So this is a card that is a game ender, not an early game thing. If we get away from how it would affect me, Google unionizing probably would mean less hours. Would probably mean, I don't know. Like, is their working conditions really that bad compared to any other job in the United States? It really feels like it probably isn't, and that this is a privilege. The idea of unionizing is a privilege for an overpaid class and an overpampered class. They're doing like no physical labor. The only thing you could even argue a Google employee is doing that's dangerous is the fact that somebody somewhere has to moderate the like vast amounts of beheading and child porn flagged videos and content otherwise. And usually they're shipping that out to contractors anyways, and I think inherently unionization is going to point out that the contractors' jobs would then become the union employees' jobs, whether they like it or not. So they have to be slightly careful of what they wish for there. Otherwise, because I don't think that's what their hope was in that case, is that they would become the ones doing the low-level flagging work. But otherwise, most YouTube employees, I think, mostly just make policy and stupid policy decisions, or they're programming and they're dealing with that. I mean, the thing is, you can't really have faith that there's some kind of secret cabal of even slightly conservative employees at Google that are going to bring Google to the middle. You have to just assume that they're all flaming extreme social justice liberals, not even just like regular liberal people. There's like so liberal even liberals don't want to be associated with them. That's a YouTube employee, pretty much. Like, I could definitely name a dozen other companies that I would prefer to hear talk of unionization. But maybe Google will push those companies to unionize too. Like, frankly, if Amazon.com workers, the Amazon warehouse workers unionized, that makes a lot more sense. Those are actual people doing actual physical laborious jobs. Those are people that definitely need that. Unions have always been kind of for people who are at kind of more physical, lower skill jobs, that they never really for jobs and positions where you're highly doing something highly technical and you're highly qualified for that, because the assumption was that degree, if your college degree was worth anything, it would have been the thing that ensures your continued employment and makes you desirable as an employee and unreplaceable. But seemingly that is not really the case anymore. But also, in the same event, if Facebook or Twitter or any of those companies unionized, it feels like the exact same thing, where the only difference here is now you're going to have companies like Facebook and Google who have pretended like they were very progressive and liberal because it benefited them, are now they're going to have to show their true colors in the fact that they, like all corporations, are only interested in profits, and that they're going to start union busting in the exact same way that union busting always happens in capitalist society. Anyways, let's move on away from that, because it really is mostly just conjecture, and we will just have to see. Oh, this is interesting. Here we have National Video Game Museum putting out a device I've never seen. Released in 1979, Nintendo's Color TV Game Block Breaker offered Nintendo's own spin on the familiar breakout concept. This system's eye-catching whimsical design is thanks none other to Shigeru Miyamoto. This was a Japanese only release, that's why I haven't seen it. Yep. This is kind of a great example of the first generation of video game consoles where there were no cartridges and you literally were buying a piece of equipment that only played one game, maybe had 3 or 4 different modes. Let's see. Over the weekend, we really wouldn't have had too many games coming out. I'm a little surprised to hear that SpongeBob Battle for Bikini Bottom Rehydrated is coming to mobile, but that kind of makes more sense than anything else as far as why you would make a remake. And it probably is a good concept, or at least a good experiment, as far as what you should do if you're going to remake a game that is kid-friendly and kind of based on nostalgia and really just isn't going to have a big audience. Here we have a game on Steam here called Little Brother's Turn, which seems like it's kind of a joke where you are just telling your little brother what to do, and apparently smacking him in the head sometimes too, and yelling at him, which I mean, if you're the little brother in this scenario, if you have any memories of that, that doesn't seem like that would be a fun experience there. It feels like this is a joke concept that would be funny as kind of like a mini game in a WarioWare, not something that I think works in reality. See, every time I can play this, I'm already about to die, so the only thing I can do here is that, and then either this or this. And then that. Yeah, and if you're the older brother, I don't know if you really should be entertaining yourself on the fact that you were probably a bad older brother when you were young. See, this is the kind of thing that's like either encouraging bullies in kids that are that age, or just re-encouraging someone who was a bully instead of having them grow and realize, oh no, I was a jerk as a little kid. Like all little kids are jerks, and I should feel a little bit bad about that. This is $2.99 English only, and yeah, as an actual game, if we just take the moral implications out of it, it doesn't look like it's anything. If anything, it seems like it's just kind of a excuse to squeeze down a terrible game and try and sell it like it isn't a terrible game. Let's start swapping around and trying some other cards, some other characters. Take Raptor, we know, is still kind of working to have content, so they have like Stardew Valley's top romances, which frankly this is one of these evergreen type stories that you could have written about at any point, and it's smart writing when you are running a website and need to have some kind of content. But I didn't know there was a male character you could romance, but apparently there's several of them. Interesting. It seems like it's almost a full split here. You have Abigail, Haley, Leah, and then Alex, Sebastian, and Shane. Yeah, I probably have seen stories talking about that, but it slipped my mind, certainly. I saw a link here to obscure video games. This looks like this is based on an anime. I definitely remember a green-haired anime girl, not Lum, that was in Space Get Up. This apparently is called Time Gal for the Sega CD. And you definitely could see how this is basically like the Laserdisc games where you're just clicking single buttons to move the story forward. Yeah, that is definitely interesting to potentially see something you haven't seen before. Although almost certainly not a good game. Sega CD had that eternal problem that there was very few Sega CDs and very few of them that were actually good. Even though the idea of embracing CD technology and having that extra space was smart, I think the inherent limitations of not having anybody program for CD games yet was a problem. And certainly I doubt the Sega CD was even a fast 1x CD-ROM, and at 1x CD speeds you can't load the data off the CD-ROM fast enough, and you don't have enough buffer at that time to even have really long 3-minute loads into RAM to then make a game run faster, which basically left a CD as only being useful. A 1x CD-ROM is really only useful for playing CD music, which had they advertise the Sega CD as this accessory that gives you better music, and you play it along the same time as you play a cartridge, it might have been a dual way to market that. But I imagine that just didn't occur to them, or they didn't want to potentially have to sully the technological advancement by admitting that it's only good for like one thing. Next we have a game on Steam called Infinite Gateway, which is just an infinite runner with some asset flip things. Apparently Epic is promoting, this is 49 cents English only, nothing interesting there. Epic is promoting the idea that the Unreal Engine 5 is around the corner and they're gonna show it off. It's a little weird because the Unreal Engine 4 is frankly only like 2 or 3 years old, and while that did seem to be a fairly easy, smooth transition forward without having to really reprogram your game, and we saw several games that did just jump from the Unreal Engine 3 to 4 without real problems, like The Vanishing of Ethan Carter seemed like it was less than an hour's worth of work, although in all fairness, The Vanishing of Ethan Carter isn't really a highly technical game. The only thing I imagine we will see once the Unreal Engine 5 comes out, and Epic is just trying to promote itself and it's trying to get those numbers up to, like, there probably are some other engines out there that are at version 8, 9, or 10, and if they can increase their release schedule by only releasing minimal changes, I think they'd appreciate that. But I imagine in reality the only thing that's going to be majorly different is just better support for things like ray tracing in software. Like, if I was to guess, that's definitely one of the things.
What do we have here?
Such a lovely couple.
Best of luck to you.
There we go. It may have been a little bit of overkill, but I think that works for me. Gamasutra has an article. The Bloodborne producer Teruyuki Toriyama has departed Sony Interactive Entertainment Japan studio. So we have another high-profile Japanese employee. Kazunobu Sato and Junya Okura both have left. Like, I don't know how you can't see that and think, oh yeah, Sony is in trouble as far as Japanese Sony. Like,
There you are, my little trespasser.
it is
What an oaf.
it is so obvious that the writing is on the wall that even Japanese people are leaving the company instead of sticking around forever. Although in Japan I haven't heard of any real instances where Japanese companies have just been run into the ground so terribly that they go bankrupt or anything like that. There seems like there's always some company that's willing to bail them out or buy them cheaply. So yeah, I can't think of any story of any big company going bankrupt and just leaving the employees high and dry, except for like production companies that are designed from day one to be dissolved at the end of that one production of whatever one project they're working on. That is one of the benefits of running your business so incredibly conservatively where you won't do any business at all unless it's a sure thing is that you then don't do any business at all unless it's a sure thing. Where in America in particular, companies will invest in and go all in on the craziest of concepts. Speaking of crazy concepts, I actually did look at the price of bitcoins and I was thinking, yeah, maybe it sure would have been nice if I had invested in bitcoins. I never really paid attention to them, but had it caught my interest back in the early days, a single bitcoin is worth like $33,000 now. It's somewhere around that. And so back in the days when a single bitcoin was trading at like less than $1, you could certainly have invested $100 and forgotten about it, and then less than a decade later been very, very rich, assuming all of that is really legitimate, and who knows if it is or not. I wouldn't be surprised if people eventually found out that most of the bitcoins were actually in the pocket of a select group of people who got in very early, or the person who created the Bitcoin protocol himself. TechRaptor has an article here. Microsoft calls for out-of-court arbitration on the Xbox Drift lawsuit. I didn't even know there was an Xbox Drift lawsuit, though. Interesting. But yeah, no doubt they still want... Every company wants to arbitrate because they know it's in their best interest. And the whole arbitration system is a mess as far as I can see. It's just not a good system at all. And it reeks of corruption in the fact that arbitrators are almost always former retired judges. And that the arbitrators can act in much more of a corrupted manner than a judge can, because they're not held anywhere to the same standards or to any legal standards whatsoever. This was the whole point of the jury system, and as bad as the jury system often can be, it is much better than any other system I can think of for individuals and small people. That's why every time you have a company suing another company, they immediately want to eliminate the jury, is because they know it won't go well for either one of them. Let's see. Moving on, we have a TechRaptor article here. War Thunder is now mired in controversy after an advertiser sponsors pro-Russian militants. Interesting. So apparently a game company has advertising for Gaijin's Entertainment War Thunder, a game I have never heard of, and Crossout has appeared in pro-Russian military videos on YouTube. How is the War Thunder dev allegedly funding pro-Russian rebels in Ukraine? So is the real question here is why? I don't know, but also wouldn't be surprised. This is a interesting controversy that kind of fails to meet the one characteristic that I would need to actually consider it a important controversy, in the fact that I just don't know what a War Thunder is. It's just not a game I've ever heard of, and it sounds like it's just a low effort military game. Let's see. Gaijin Entertainment is
There's a drama of life and death.
This here's all mine.
this all day.
Gaijin Entertainment sounds like it's a Japanese company.
War is the most sacred act.
My stomach.
But I don't know why a Japanese company would be supporting pro-Russian Ukrainian rebels. But there could be any reasons for that. Stupidity being a top possibility. Just ignorance. It's not unheard of though to say that there are definitely some Japanese people out there that are like super on the other side of the America-Russian split there, Axis and Allies split. They're definitely they don't get highlighted and they don't really get a voice, but there are definitely people in Japan that think that Japan should go back to the old Japan that was in existence during the World War. And there definitely are pro-Russian people in Japan. I imagine that's true in every country. Let's not be silly about it. So it's not unheard of for somebody in America to do something crazy and or fund something crazy. In fairness, the response is we do not provide political support to anyone anywhere. We know nothing about politics and we prefer to stay out of it. Our agency that ordered the ad in the video in question took it down when they realized they might drag us into a political discussion. We have nothing more to comment regarding this. We prefer to talk about games and games only, which is just pretty much the perfect response. Yeah, and see, that's inherently the thing here is that it's not just that one person would have had to have had this more fringe leanings, as it were. It would have to have been that a lot of people have these fringe leanings. But when you look at their website, is it really even that fringe of a leaning when you look? While the name is deceptive, that it's called Gaijin Entertainment, you see it was established in 2002 and it has offices directly in Russia, Germany, Cyprus, Hungary, and Latvia, where I imagine its main office is in Russia. This is certainly not alphabetical. So I suspect that this is a Russian company that knew exactly what it was doing, or at least maybe the advertiser knew exactly what it was doing and decided to pull some shenanigans. I mean, it's really, really hard to give the benefit of the doubt there. See.
Come get some.
Darn it. Yeah, it's really hard to believe them when they are a Russian company and Russia is literally known for doing this, for funneling money and laundering money through video games. You can see the other games that they've crafted, and it is also pretty much all games that I would call war style ripoffs. Blades of Time being an exception there, but this one doesn't even have a title around it. These all do look like fairly low effort Russian games. or low effort games in general that you'd expect from a low effort Russian game developer. So it really just comes down to whether you want to call it an accident or whether you want to call it a whether you want to call it them getting caught. Oh yeah, this guy literally cannot be killed. It's that guy. I hate that guy.
It won't be long now. I've got 8 transformations up my sleeve.
So that's one of those examples of a story that I hadn't even heard about, but it does certainly give you more perspective. It's a shining example of why I cover video game news in general and why I look at all the games that come out on Steam, is that this is something that will almost certainly not be big enough to be talked about on anything like Giant Bomb's Bombcast or anything like that. I imagine Kotaku, Polygon, and the likes will, if they mention it at all, they will try desperately to wrap it around some like political anti-Trump stance that will be a fairly large stretch. Otherwise, they're not going to bother to mention it at all because it's just not going to be an interesting enough story. And so it would have been very easy to miss that story. Moving on, TechRaptor has the great mods for Skyrim Special Edition, which Skyrim Special Edition in particular kind of hurt a lot of the mods. I feel like I don't think that when on the occasions that MXR, the YouTuber MXR makes a video when he's not got a community guideline strike against him, like all those adult mods and all of those mods I assume are running on the original Skyrim and not the old Skyrim, because I think Special Edition, the original Skyrim, not Special Edition, because Special Edition I think pretty much locked everything down and tried to sell mods. But maybe we finally have started to move away from that, and maybe that is the case. Let's see. There's Alternate Start Live Another Life. It's lore friendly and it's also on Xbox One. That lets you start in some different areas of the world and gives you different abilities. There's Ordination, which if you built another stealthy archer by accident, consider this perk overhaul mod. Ordinator makes changes, character building much more dynamic. The trees stay lore friendly as well. You probably hear a lot in this article about lore friendliness. Although it puts me in a weird position because I'm not sure I really care about Skyrim mods that much. There's an Apocalypse, 150 new spells. Then there's Falsker, 20 hours of gameplay. More quests. Relationship dialogue overhaul. Beyond Skyrim, Bruma. Let's see. So that's a new land. And then more of a race menu to customize your characters. Realistic lighting overhauls. And static mesh improvements. So none of these mods that TechRaptor is mentioning are the adult mods that, frankly, I think that is probably the main reason that a lot of people are still playing Skyrim, is like they probably are at least 60% of the time installing crazy adult mods instead of trying to add more content mods, Honestly, if I wanted a Skyrim-like experience after playing all of Skyrim, I would go and play The Witcher 3. And I still haven't done the DLC for The Witcher 3. It would be very, very hard to justify going back to Skyrim for a third or fourth time in my instance over doing the DLC for Witcher 3.
The earth rains from above.
And certainly I would just want to build up any tolerance to whatever the next Elder Scrolls game is. We are closer than ever to actually having a new Elder Scrolls game now that Microsoft owns ZeniMax. Although arguably I've heard that Microsoft is very hands-off, so I wouldn't be surprised if Bethesda still is allowed to sit around and do nothing as far as the Elder Scrolls series. We are at that point where you could easily exhaust yourself if you've never played Skyrim 3. You should do it right now. Special edition, I think, is the fine for PC. But yeah, you should do it as quickly as possible, because if you don't, you may end up spending 200 hours on Skyrim 3 and then not be interested in playing Skyrim, well, the next Elder Scrolls game, which is almost certainly not going to be Skyrim 2.
No dirty tricks.
And the fact that people talk about Skyrim way more than they talk about Elder Scrolls is a big problem for them. I am in the exact same position with Fallout, because I kind of should play Fallout 3 and then Fallout New Vegas, and then or maybe Fallout New Vegas then Fallout 3, and I'm not sure which ones even came out in what order.
Earth rains from above.
Hey, no dirty
There we
tricks.
go. And then I should play like Fallout 4 after I play those other two Fallout games, and that's certainly asking a lot. And definitely if I was to play Fallout 3, I'd probably keep it as a minimal experience and not wander off the main story. And probably do the same for New Vegas, which is a game I've never played. And probably do the same for Fallout 4, which is a game, although gifted to me, and I still very much appreciate that game was gifted to me, I've failed miserably to actually play. Moving on, we have Fairy Tale Mosaics, Beauty and the Beast 2, which is a jigsaw puzzle game. It seems fairly kid-friendly, also kind of unique art style. It feels like it is a classical painting art style instead of what could have easily just been asset flipped anime or low effort drawings.
At your service.
$2.99, bunch of languages. Nothing wrong here, but then again, $3 for a game like this doesn't make sense unless you have a kid and they just love these kinds of puzzles. And frankly, it would probably cost more to buy the real world puzzles than it would be to buy it digitally, particularly if you don't have a way of gifting puzzles that have already been done, or getting rid of puzzles after they've already been done. That certainly was a problem with me back when I was doing jigsaw puzzles, is that you very quickly end up with having a lot of jigsaw puzzles that are completed. So either you're going to then have to just break the puzzles up and gift it, or you are going to have to gift it as a finished piece, which then requires either gluing it using a special kind of puzzle glue or a special kind of puzzle laminate to laminate it down, which I found the laminate tended to be a slightly better solution, but the puzzle glue also works. The thing that I vaguely recall is that the puzzle glue in particular would break apart if you weren't really excessive with it. You kind of had to glue it on the top and the bottom because there's just not a lot of surface area there to glue the cardboard together. Whereas the laminate held everything together very nicely, but then you have a laminate over it that makes it look a little bit worse for wear. And when you get up close to it, you could also go the crazy route, certainly, and
Nothing stops me once I got my speedy boots on.
You could go the really crazy route and have it behind glass, but that's not really a realistic solution.
Mana, come forth.
I always catch the varmint. Eventually. Rapid fire. Justice finds a way.
This guy is one of the characters in the main story, which is interesting to say the least. Next we have Fairy Tale Mosaic Cinderella, and in this case the art style for the actual Cinderella images are more low effort, just generic drawings, and then all these images are kind of just real world images that, like this image in particular, kind of doesn't make any sense as far as Cinderella, because that's not the story of Cinderella, is that the prince and Cinderella knew each other as kids, or ever had even ever really met before that day. And then when you look at these real world images, that you have like a dog that doesn't make any sense, you have some carriages that don't really make sense, the fact that there's 2 carriages. So this is pretty low effort in what I've seen before for $2.99, same price, probably the exact same developer. They just managed to do a little bit better on one versus another. Right. 3. And then 3. And then do that. And then I guess we do that. And then I guess we end the turn. Even if those problems weren't there, of course, it's still just the same issue. Game Sutra has a blog. What makes for a good game publishing contract? I feel like we had already seen a article around this, and I guess maybe this is a revisiting of that idea as far as Raw Fury's publishing agreement. This is one of those cases where it certainly does only make sense to read an article like this if you actually are a game company and actually looking to sign a deal with a publisher. Otherwise, it's so inside baseball, it just doesn't really matter. Like, it is incredibly stupid for any individual consumer to concern themselves one bit about whether the developer of a game is getting a good deal or a bad deal, because at the end of the day, you've just got to live with your own life and deal with your own problems, not become the warriors for one corporation fighting with another corporation for a few more pennies, which is really what this would boil down to. Should I attack this guy?
This match is mine.
Moving on, TechRaptor has an article. Hundreds of Nintendo DSi games have been delisted across North America. Midst of a purge of Nintendo DSi titles, more than half of the games for the Nintendo DSi has been delisted. Essentially, the games are still downloadable if they are previously bought, but newcomers can no longer buy hundreds of DSi titles. These games include Shantae Risky's Revenge, Dr. Mario Express. See, that's weird that it would be a direct Nintendo game. And almost certainly this is a case where Nintendo just does not care about the DSi and is just trying to shut down the platform. But, like, it could also very well been that all of these contracts existed to sell the game for only 10 years instead of contracts that would have been available for purchase forever. Like, I assume when you list a game on Steam, you're agreeing to allow your game to be sold by Steam for all of eternity, unless you actively, as the publisher or seller of the game, want it delisted, or Steam actively decides that they want to delist things. And I guess it is the case that Steam probably could come in here and say all old games that don't run on Windows 10 are now going to be delisted from our storefront. But deal 4 damage to an enemy.
Watch closely, apprentices. No one's getting
Well, that didn't work that well. But yeah, suppose that's something to certainly take to heart as far as buying games or committing yourself too much to even like the Nintendo Switch, is that they have never been good about supporting their old hardware and their old content, to the point that they don't even really support things that are that aren't even replaced now. Like, it would make a lot of sense if all of those DSi games had been ported over to the 3DS or the Switch, and they're just saying, well, and they could come out with a press statement saying, well, all of these games are available for purchase again on newer consoles. But I don't believe that would be 100% the case. And it, in a weird way, it kind of points to the problem of the laws, as it were, being built around making your own contract, and contract law being designed such a terrible way. Whereas it would make a lot more sense if there were standardized, registered with the government contracts that just exist, and they've been tested in court, and they can be tested in court over and over again, and it would just simplify everything, because so many contracts out there are written by people who aren't lawyers at all, and you're basically having a contract that maybe it's written down, maybe it's just a handshake deal, but let's just call those contracts too. So many dealings are done that way, or you have a lawyer, but the lawyer team only was willing to put 100 man hours into it, so they just handed you the contract after 100 man hours, regardless of how much research and care and due diligence should have been put into it. Also, certainly, it's very hard to be forward-looking and negotiate a contract on either side that says this potentially is going to be a contract that goes on forever. It's actually illegal to have a contract that goes on for more than 100 years. A contract like that would be thrown out of court anyways. But that you usually have contracts where there's opportunities for both sides to renew the contract. And maybe that was the case with the DSi games, is that the companies could renew it, but many of those companies just decided, let's not bother to renew it, because it costs money and it costs time, certainly, to even have that meeting. Like, unless it is literally just an email saying, yeah, sure, keep selling it, that costs time, and people often want to renegotiate, and I bet Nintendo doesn't even want to open the door to potentially renegotiating the listing of DSi games. Of course, this would have been an opportunity for Nintendo to say, hey, let's actually renegotiate and bring these games over to the Switch, where I wouldn't be surprised if it would have been fairly easy to put an emulator in the Switch to play DSi games and expand their online offerings, but Nintendo's too lazy to do that, of course. Moving on, Gamasutra as a blog here. Steam's end of the year bonanza gets experimental, which faceted sub pages, I guess, happened where you could look at different categories, which is sort of the new categories experimental idea, which does let them kind of highlight more things. And apparently there are some games on Steam, like these mobile key game garbage. I haven't seen too many of these on Steam, though. I haven't seen ads on Steam promoting mobile games, nor have I seen this, so I don't know how they found those. If anything, my biggest complaint with the Steam sale was the fact that they literally got at least one adult game that had full-on porn on it, like on the front page, which, again, I'm not being a prude here. It's just very weird to have uncensored porn on the front page of Steam. If they were going to make that change, they needed to kind of prepare me and tell me, hey, yeah, this is the new normal. If you choose this, is that you're gonna potentially see uncensored porn on the screenshots of games. I would say that this Steam Winter Sale, on top of lasting later into January than I feel like it has in the past, is very much just kind of a non-thing, a low effort, which, fair enough. Like, nobody has money. It makes a lot of sense to not try and overcharge people at this time, and realize that there's going to be a minimal amount of money people can spend. It just mostly struck me as something that, as far as my personal journey, this is the first sale where I've really given up on trading cards. I just sold all the trading cards that I got from my purchases, and I did not go through the curator on a daily basis. I don't think I went through the curator feed even once. And honestly, they probably should just get rid of the curator feed in general. It's something they tried, but I don't feel like it works well. Like, it probably works well for somebody out there if they're really, really interested in brand new games and just kind of looking at everything that's new on Steam, and they're not doing what I'm doing, which is just following the Twitter feed of what's on Steam. But for the vast majority of other people, either you're going to see those same games on the front page, or you're just never going to see those games anyways, and you would have never been interested in most of them anyways, because you are hitting 80-90% of every game on the curator feeds on Steam being just low effort garbage games that most people don't have any interest of ever seeing. Like, desperately looking for a hidden gem in that way is not a good system, and now that they're introducing more categories, there's a much better system there. I wouldn't be upset if the front page actually changed so that every major category or different random categories, kind of like Netflix does, showed up, and so you would have a horizontal bar that says these are the action games that are trending right now, so check out these action games, or these are the okay, is this the right move? Let's do this first, and then do this, I guess. Steam still definitely needs to rebuild their whole website, and they haven't made any real progress to that. That's the bigger issue, certainly. Next, we have a game on Steam here called Fly the Cloud, which is obviously just a low-effort asset flip game where you're riding on a cloud that barely even looks like a cloud. English, Japanese, Chinese, take your pick on who made this low-effort game for 79 cents. Might want to hurry up. It's already been 2 hours and I've barely gone anything. Any of the news. Yee's 9 Monstrum Nox demo is now available for the PS4 in the West. This game was announced with actually very little fanfare, and it's a little surprising considering it's a Japanese game and part of the Yee's series. Gamasutra has Best of 2020, the top 10 games of the year, which Gamasutra also fairly late to the party. Apparently this came out in December 28th, but I didn't see it, so maybe they rebroadcasted it. So they're like Animal Crossing, Astro's Playroom, Blaze Ball, Dreams, Fall Guys, Hades, Hard Space Shipbreaker, which there's another game that has almost the exact same name on Steam, Jackbox Party Pack 7, Spider-Man Miles Morales, Yakuza Like a Dragon. Honestly, almost any game thrown up for 2020's best game of the year feels fairly acceptable to me these days. It's like I have no passion whatsoever to argue that there are better games that came out in 2020, because there's basically no games that came out in 2020, which is fine. I mean, like 2020, if you were somehow magically capable of not being miserable for several other reasons, and you just decided to quadruple down on playing your old games that you never got around to playing or that you want to play again, then 2020 could have been the year for you. But that's a lot of ifs, certainly. Alright, well, let's evolve this.
The hunt has only begun.
And then hit that. And hit that. Then end the turn. Next, we have a game on Steam here called Hawthorne Park, and this looks slightly polished visually, but the actual gameplay doesn't seem like it's much, and it kind of feels like they've just gotten some good visual assets that they've assembled into a robot that seems to kind of just roll around and parkour and jump, and that's kind of it. Yeah, in a funny way, it does feel like there's a lot of polish and effort to the level design, but then there's like no concept or reason or rhyme to what you're seeing. So you're just platforming. We've seen this in other games too, where you end up doing something that looks kind of fancy, but then there's no story or reason for anything. This is $14.99, and they say it's VR. So does that mean you're playing from the perspective of the robot? I don't think so. I think it's a third-person VR game, which also seems pretty crazy. So, yeah. I don't know why I'm going back home. Trying to get treasure chests. Not succeeding. Swap over to unlimited. Seems like my win ratio chances are a little bit higher. Gamatsu has an article here. Savers of Sapphire Rings and Stranger of Sword City Revisited have new feature trailers. So apparently these are two JRPG games, I would assume. That very well are in the same series. And you look at those promos and you wasn't really expecting this. Now this really feels like more of a card game, but not quite a card game either. Seems like an RPG game where the characters turn into cards, and it's more of a dungeon crawler gacha game by the looks of it. Honestly, though, there's not enough uniqueness there to make me think that's more than a simplistic average gacha game. This was an interesting bit of information that's come out. Apparently, according to TechRaptor and others, Breath of the Wild's NPCs are upgraded Wii Miis, or Nintendo Miis, whatever. I guess I would just call Miis. And players are adding their own, which, yeah, you never know where technology will go, and it certainly would be fairly ridiculous for them to have taken the character generation code that they had made in the Mii and not do something with it. If anything, I would argue Nintendo still has really failed to do a lot with the Miis, and just cramming it into Breath of the Wild only highlights a larger issue with Breath of the Wild, even though it by all means sounds like a great game. I haven't played it myself, but I'm fully willing to admit that it's a great game. I think there is definitely criticism to say that Breath of the Wild so focused its time on making a giant open world game that it kind of failed to have the elements that you would expect from a Zelda game. I don't know if there really were that many interesting characters. If you consider like Ocarina of Time, you're running into a whole bunch of friends of Link and interesting characters that you interact with and deal with. I don't feel like there was really that much there. There definitely weren't any dungeons in Breath of the Wild. Not really. Everything was these small little areas with like one little puzzle. The entire gameplay mechanic of Breath of the Wild is different than every other Zelda game in the fact that it is a stamina-based climbing mechanic where the rest of the games have always been hack and slash action games. So, and the reason that happened, one has to assume, is because at some level, at some point, there was a lack of success as far as getting Breath of the Wild out on time, and they fell behind, and they either didn't have the budget or they didn't have the time to make a Zelda game the way it should be. And it definitely feels like whatever next Zelda game comes out needs to get back to its roots and needs to feel a lot more like Ocarina of Time with the graphics of Breath of the Wild or better, and not like more of the same. I don't think very many people would be happy at all if Breath of the Wild 2 came out. It was called Breath of the Wild 2, and it was the same landmass, because why would they change the landmass? And it's the same level of things to do and people to interact with, and very little has changed. It's just a different story with a different bad guy. That would also be very inconsistent with the Zelda series, where every single game has had major changes.
The power of nature.
Yeah. It's a better point to take from this also, that why are Mii's not just in the Switch by default? Why was the Mii channel not brought to the Wii U? I don't think it was on the Wii U. But why weren't they ported over? Like, even if there was like no way to transfer a Mii from a Wii over to the Switch, why isn't there something like that? At the very least, on the Xbox, they overhauled their design of their character creations, and they barely used the avatars at all, but they didn't abandon it. So for the people that are happy with the avatar system in Microsoft, they are still happy with it. They didn't get anything taken away. Where Nintendo fans, if there were really a lot of people that were happy with the Mii's, they got that feature taken away. Now, arguably, the Mii's were never really that popular. Like, there's just a couple of Mii's you might want to have. There's like, I believe on my Wii, I found one that was, that looked like Mario and Luigi, and one that looked like Santa Claus, and I think one that looked like Hitler. And that was pretty much it, because the Mii's all kind of looked the same anyways. And there really wasn't a lot to do with them, and they only got imported to a small number of games, so it was fairly useless as far as a feature. But it was a first step, and a step that certainly I don't think deserved to just be abandoned without giving it a chance. Alright. Here, 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 and here.
Let's play. It won't be long now. This is the only way out of the world. That's strange.
I do want victories, but at the moment I'm not under any real pressure to get victories, so it's fairly easy to be laid back in today's stream. Maybe that should always be the case, but then that would double the amount of time I spend playing this card game, and I don't want that. Moving on, we have a game on Steam here called Looking for Girls, which is clearly just a RPG Maker, probably Chinese low-effort game. English is not supported. It's $11.99, Chinese only. Like, this image has nothing to do with this, and this game looks like it is absolutely nothing. It's arguable that this is not really video game news, as much as it is just real world news. But this guy was a cosplayer that showed up at BlizzCon, and he cosplayed as the stereotypical fat, nerdy, bald gamer, and people kind of loved him. And he unfortunately passed away from COVID-19. So, like, it's a weird obituary, certainly. And if anything, you could make the argument that he's cosplaying a characterization that was from South Park. So he's cosplaying a characterization from South Park as a joke, but he's also certainly propagating that stereotype. Like, he's definitely wasn't in a fat suit like he was on a bald cap. He probably does game and slouch at times, but like, I mean, you don't want to also hit a person when they're literally down in the ground. But yeah, I don't know if that's really video game news. It's certainly, it's a weird thing about cosplay in general is that cosplaying for guys is extremely limited, and the female cosplayers have to often do a lot less work and still get into the top 10. Maybe they don't win, but you can basically put on a bikini and you win in a cosplay contest. Cosplay has always felt like a very weird side hustle for any kind of convention. Like, it makes no sense to me that cosplay happens at anime conventions when there's just, it really has nothing to do with anime. It's just people dressing up. And I could get the idea that you might dress up to show your love of a thing and wear like a t-shirt, or even completely dress up as a character and walk around the anime convention and listen to the presentations from actual animators if an anime convention has that. And same as at BlizzCon, I wouldn't be upset with somebody dressing up as a Blizzard character and walking around. But once it became monetized, as it were, once there was giant fashion shows happening and people were spending half of their time at the entire convention going to these fashion shows, you've created this whole different thing. And at a certain point, that should just be a cosplay convention for cosplaying, and that would be probably a great idea and a cool idea to have different cosplayers from different fandoms and genres happen there. And this is certainly an argument that goes back to even like sci-fi conventions and sci-fi conventions not even liking soft sci-fi things being talked about as compared to hard sci-fi things being talked about. But yeah, it feels like a level of corruption cosplay does. But that really also has nothing to do with this person passing away. But this person has nothing to do with video games. He didn't make video games as far as I know. He played video games, I assume. But that's kind of it. It's kind of hard to have anything else to say. So we'll just leave it there. And it definitely probably points to a slow news day that got mentioned. Next, we have a game on Steam called Bridge, which looks like it's just an asset flip game. It seems to zoom in and zoom out. It seems that it's a bridge with a bunch of stuff on the bridge. A bridge walking simulator, free to play, English only. Why is something like this on Steam? The only argument that anything like this should even be allowed on Steam is the idea that this developer is working towards potentially building up its name to sell something else, and that doesn't even fly when you see they've already made another low effort asset flip game on Steam. So, like, how many strikes is too many? On Steam, it's an infinite number of strikes. You never get shown as you never get kicked off the platform, regardless of how many ridiculous low effort games you put on the listings. But yeah, that just does not work digitally or physically. If there was a Coca-Cola drink on the shelves that was regular Coke, just regular Coke, decent quality, you know what you're getting, everyone's fairly satisfied with that. And then directly next to that is a Coca-Cola thing that will literally kill you because it's got bleach in it. Walmart would never let that happen. No store would let that happen. And yet, because it's just video games, Steam lets that happen. You let terrible, terrible games reflect on the quality of your storefront on a daily basis
Don't
without
underestimate me.
even caring.
Stink of communism.
And it makes things like this game, Killfish, look worse in comparison. Or just by being in the same company. And it's not like this game, Killfish, even looks that amazingly good, but it doesn't deserve to be next to a low-effort asset flip game. It deserves... This is the kind of game that looks like it should be able to be sold, because it feels like there's a real effort here, even if it hasn't actually succeeded at making a great game. If this is sold for like $1 or $2.99 even, I'd be fine with that. This is $10.99, unfortunately, and it's English and Russian also. We'll leave the languages out of it. And at that price, that's a no. And perhaps it is just me, but I am definitely not sold on the idea that a game could possibly ever increase its value in my mind to the point where I'd pay $10 for a game that I think is only worth $2.99 just because there are so many worse games out there. That is like the dumbest logical fallacy that sometimes I hear in the real world, and it just is ridiculous even then too. It's so dumb. Is that like, well, you should appreciate this game that's overpriced, or because there's a lot worse out there. It's like if somebody gave you a McDonald's burger and said, you should appreciate this burger because there are starving children in Africa. It's like, well, yeah, so what? That doesn't mean that McDonald's burger is filet mignon. Moving on, we have a game called Villa's Blinds here, which seems to be nothing from the looks of it. Seems just to be a random assortment of asset flips. You're developing a game in a rental garage. Early access 1049, English, Turkish, German, Russian. Nope. Yeah, I really do need to just embrace saying nope more to some of these games. Like, it's not particularly informative for me to say no to a game and not explain why, but so often it's the same thing. It's just like, no, this isn't good enough. No, this is a low effort asset flip. No, this is not my type of game. Here we have a game called Cruelty Squad, and just by the graphics you know it's kind of nothing. Low polygon, first person shooter. Looks terrible. It's early access for $19.99. Nope, it's too expensive. At that. Although, frankly, a game that looks like that would not even qualify if it was free. I wouldn't play it even then. Here we have what looks like a Chinese game when a man loses his job. Which, yeah, certainly difficult to lose a job anywhere, but in China or Japan, that's particularly socially disapproved of. English is not supported, $7.99, Chinese only. And that is also certainly taking into a factor that the jobs in China tend not to be particularly good in the first place. That is, without getting into a huge economics rant, definitely a factor as far as if universal basic income of any amount was the standard in most countries, many people would be in a much better situation to simply not have their lives center around being a wage slave for some corporation somewhere. Like, we have to, in particular in the modern age, realize that due to laws, cronyism, copyrights, trademarks, things like that, there has been a almost 100% reduction in the ability for someone to start their own business and succeed. Like, you can start your own business, certainly, but you won't in the long run succeed, which is a loaded statement, certainly, but it's basically the truth. You're just not going to be able to be successful. Even if you did manage to be successful for a few years, you'll have the likes of Amazon or Walmart come in and steal your idea. So it would be very, very nice for people to say, hey, my life is not just about getting a job. My life does not end if I lose a job. My life is more about me finding fulfillment in a way I actually want to find fulfillment, instead of struggling to just keep myself fed and clothed and in the house. And there definitely would be people out there, and that's not a bad thing. That this isn't a bad thing, but there would be people out there that say, hey, I'm just happy to take universal basic income and not do anything. And not that doesn't inherently mean that they would all be depressed. I mean, some people will just be happy relaxing watching a sunset and living potentially with nature, growing a garden, just doing hobby things that literally won't ever pay them anything or become a career for them. Lots of people would love to just form bands and just play music with their friends. Moving on, we have Ship Handling Simulator, which looks like a mobile game that's been ported, where you're supposedly trying to move ships around without crashing. $7.64. Although inherently, I think this is an advertisement game, a game that is advertising itself more on actually crashing the ships into each other. And the ships do seem to be of different eras, in that you have something here that looks a lot like the Titanic, and then you have others that look more like shipping containers. Let's see. Let's do this.
I am Solomon, the first mate.
Spell it so sweet you'll get cavities.
This match is mine.
The world shall show me.
Let's hurry up and finish for today. Here we have a game on Steam called Fallen Rebellion, which looks like a low effort asset flip game, trying to be more of an infinite runner, with maybe some crazier ways to knock you off, which kind of like the TV show Wipeout, which is based off of, I guess, Takashi's Castle. It says $9.99 English only. There's just not enough visual polish there. Honestly, all of the Wipeout style, Takashi Castle style games have never really played well, in the sense that they are just not really fun to play for more than 10-15 minutes, because they're games that are built around the idea of failing and resetting and failing and resetting, and that's just not the gameplay style that I tend to appreciate. In a previous stream, I mentioned that the Zodiac year must be the year of the cow. Turns out it's the year of the ox. I thought cow because I saw a bunch of anime girls in cow outfits with the Happy New Year's from a bunch of Japanese animators, and so they have basically translated the idea of year of the ox into a cow, which I suppose is close enough. Here we can see a animation where it is more of an ox, but it is a crazy looking ox, and I used that image to remind me of saying that. But yeah, so Chinese Zodiac Yeovyaks. Now I know. And I'll immediately forget it. Because it's not really important information. Honestly, if I wanted to know the Chinese Zodiac years, I'd probably just take that as an opportunity to go watch Jackie Chan's Adventure. Which, that was a cartoon that was out when I was too old to be watching cartoons, so I saw a few of them and they looked fine, but I didn't definitely watch the whole thing. And like many long-running cartoons, it probably went fairly crazy and got stretched out. Tech Raptor has an article here. Top Hat Games pushes back against censorship demands as on Sense, a cyberpunk ghost story. I don't know who is really pushing to censor a adult game that's a cyberpunk spoof. And in all fairness, Cyberpunk itself is pretty much an adult game. But I did see that they are that they put out a bunch of instances of tweets and death threats that almost certainly should not be taken seriously from Twitter. See, let's go ahead and play Union Burst 8, deals 7 damage. See. According to Tech Raptor, this really is a game that oddly nobody should be paying any attention to it. It says, Top Hat Studios received many messages due to the game releasing on consoles such as the Nintendo Switch due to the content that is pornographic, encourages violence, breaks the law, which I don't know what they mean by breaks the law. In that case, it's just a story. And then they've come back and say the game will not be censored. But it's like an adult sex game, so why in the world would you ever say it was to censor it? It almost feels like this would be a argument that they were having with Nintendo saying it should be censored, but then why would Nintendo have already released it if that was the case? But they're claiming that people are review bombing it. It seems like it's weird. The game was rated M, Peggy 18. Note that it is not an adults only title either, which seems to put to bed the game is not pornographic. If that is your argument, I think that's a fairly weak argument, but it's probably a good one to lean on to say, well, we're not rated M, therefore we're not pornographic. It's a logical fallacy, but it probably would work.
Like petals, all will scatter.
Honestly, a lot of this kind of feels like it's just the game developers themselves trying to cause controversy more than anything, because this is just kind of a nothing game. Like, look here. Here is the game, and let's look at this. Since, and then a whole bunch of Chinese games, a cyberpunk ghost story. According to Steam, it's 95% of 100 user reviews very positive. It's very positive. If we scroll down here, we don't have any like review bombing happening at all on Steam, I kind of have to assume that this is just straight up a lie. That while there probably have been some death threats and some garbage trolling stuff, it kind of feels like they are making a mountain out of a molehill. Like, looking, it's like looking at this game, there's nothing on the screenshots that really seem to even imply that there's nudity or anything in it. Like, you kind of just assume that it's just a Chinese parody of Cyberpunk with a big breasted girl. It's $14.99. It's English, Japanese, Russian, and Chinese, which kind of makes it only questionable if there was something here that insulted China or China didn't like it, and this is just Chinese review bombing. But I don't even see that. Yeah. This feels like a very fake controversy. And I've seen two different sites talk about it, and I just cannot, from my own eyes, confirm what is being claimed.
Falling leaf.
I don't want to play anymore.
Yeah, I'm gonna lose. And that certainly puts you in a weird position, because you have a game that's overwhelmingly positive, and I'll put it on the follow list, but then I kind of have to decide whether we want to get back to it. Like, certainly we can see in some of these images here that the artist likes to draw the characters big-breasted and lewd. Sure. But I'm just not really seeing anything. Nothing seems to confirm at all. And we're going to have to certainly run into a issue if game developers can create false narratives and just fake news their way into a controversy to get more attention for games that don't deserve attention. As far as Steam says, the developers describe the content as like this: since does not contain adult or explicit content, there is no full nudity, but features skimpy / semi-revealing outfits and mature themes. There are references to alcohol, tobacco, drugs, and topics which some may find distressing, such as murder, suicide, and abuse. References to more mature themes such as stripping exist in the game. Contains visceral horror elements which include disturbing imagery, blood, gore, and violent character deaths. Yeah, that's nothing shocking there. And honestly, let's say there was something super horrific and shocking here, then why not describe the scenes directly in your complaints? If, since there was a scene where a child is held down and a nail gun is shot through his head multiple times, just to pick a random disturbing image out of what obviously now I realize is probably a large list of disturbing images in my own head. If there was a scene like that, which seemingly there isn't, and I assume there isn't, why not mention that scene directly? The whole thing really just seems odd, and an odd kind of some story, and almost it seems like they released these Twitter messages that seem to be getting, but maybe they're getting those from fake accounts that they made themselves as a way of proving their own claims. You know, we've never really caught a video game company trying to drum up its own controversy without having at least a few people actually legitimately upset with their games. The controversies in the past have almost never gone well for game developers, and they almost always are due to the fault of their own advertising. or their bad behavior in general. But usually the bad behavior controversies don't have much to do with the games at all. And by default, yeah, I would say rah. Don't give in to demands for censorship, particularly when you're making a lewd adult game that would absolutely be nothing if it was censored. But I don't know. Maybe I'm just a contrarian and don't want to ever agree with anybody. But I don't know if there's a real story there. I hate to use the phrase fake news, but this feels like someone is trying to drum up some fake news. Like, if anything, it feels like video gamers in general and video game journalists. Now, if they had told me these were all from video game journalists, at that point, I don't even know why video game journalists would be talking about a game like Sense. It'd be much easier just not to give it the time of day or put any light on it. They could easily just blacklist it like they do every other game they don't like and never mention it. So yeah, weird situation. Moving on, TechRaptor has a review for Super Meat Boy Forever, which kind of means nothing to me because I couldn't even get through Super Meat Boy. They give it a 6.5. That's a little bit of a shame. I assume Super Meat Boy fans would have wanted it to be better than that. Super Meat Boy Forever is a decent enough game when considering it's on its own merits. Compared to the original, however, it's hard to find the auto-running sequel. It's hard not to find the auto-running sequel disappointing. Oh, so do you not control the movement? The platforming element has been neglected in favor of slick visuals and user friendliness. In a funny way, that might actually mean that Super Meat Boy Forever would be easier for me to play. I might be the target audience for Super Meat Boy Forever. Although I'm not sure I really would care or want to play it anyways. The pros are the environmentalistic themes of the story are well executed. The platforming is still pretty fun. The cons is the auto running means gameplay is less absorbing than the original, and adding a checkpoint system makes completing the level less satisfying. Yeah, it seems like they made the game easier. In a funny way, that is a sell for me. Although you also have this problem where it does not make a lot of sense for
You're a solid fighter.
it doesn't make a lot of sense for me as someone who couldn't play all the way to the end of Super Meat Boy to give it a second chance and try and play it and try and play the game. This definitely feels like the creator of Super Meat Boy wanted something different here. He didn't want to just make more levels of Super Meat Boy, which that is really the only thing that would have satisfied Super Meat Boy fans, is just more Super Meat Boy. So I have to kind of applaud the game developer. According to this trailer, it was supposed to come out in April 2019. So it must have been delayed a little bit. But yeah, I definitely have to applaud the developer for doing what they wanted to do versus doing what would have sold better. And maybe they will put out some more levels for Super Meat Boy later. Or just make a Super Meat Boy 2. Next we have a game on Steam called Blaze,
Come on.
which kind of looks like nothing.
Left in your eyes.
Yeah, you just run around as a piece of fire and you can start some other things on fire. It's free, requires a controller, it's English only. See, if you told me this was a student project, I'd be like, yeah, this looks like a student project. Although yep, it's a student project. I'm going to put it on the fall list because it's a student project, but then I'm also going to have to reconsider how many student projects I really want to cover and play. Because I am really not just overflowing with extra time to cover student projects. Mr. Beast has gotten 50 million subscribers on YouTube. This is more YouTube related than video game related. But I think it is probably pretty obvious that Mr. Beast is the new PewDiePie. And almost certainly, unless someone has some tight control around Mr. Beast, he may very well go the way of PewDiePie and fall out of favor with YouTube, or people may just get bored of him. I have not been looking at the trending gaming tab on YouTube in quite a while, probably half a year, and I went and looked at it again, and it's still just a mess of characters that people will recognize with like no new people really. I think probably the Creator on the Rise program has been mostly abandoned at this point. It's certainly not grown up or helped too many people. So yeah, there's really just not a bunch of experience there. I also spent several hours last night watching Avengers Endgame for the first time, and last time I would never commit the amount of time. I was watching it on cable, so they were putting in commercials every 5 minutes. And yeah, that is too long of a movie for what it does. It has too many people in it, and because it has too many people in it, it gets shortchanged quite a bit. There is an argument that you couldn't have split it into two movies because it already was the sequel, the part B of Endgame Part 1. So yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I may very well have been watching all of Endgame, the Part 1 and the Part 2, and I just came in halfway and it still was like 3 hours long. But yeah, there really isn't a lot to say about that movie other than it just is really, really too long. And I don't know how you fix that without just eliminating characters completely. One thing you do definitely is you could definitely feel like the Miss Marvel and the Black Panther characters could have easily been eliminated from the movies. They didn't really play a big role. The Galaxy of the Guardian characters could also have been eliminated from the movie fairly easily. If you get rid of the final battle scene that just kind of abruptly ends anyways, and bring it down to just a focused fight with the Thanos, I think you have a better experience there anyways.
I won't stop singing until there's world peace.
So yeah, if you get rid of the big final battle, since that thematically doesn't even really play a good role in the story, you're much better off having it be a smaller affair. You then eliminate a lot of the people who were brought back from being in the movie, and it is when the final battle happens that the story really starts to fall apart. You definitely could have saved on the CGI budget that way. Or, you know what you could do is instead of changing the bringing everybody back
Sing another note.
after they'd been eliminated and destroyed for 5 years, you could have simply you could have simply changed the final battle in the previous movie so that they won, and then you could reuse that footage. And frankly, you could have shot that footage so that they did win and they lost, and then you could make in-game just be around how they changed the past. But they overcommitted on the idea that they couldn't change the past, which was a dumb conceit for no good reason. And that created a lot of problems.
Want to play?
They didn't really solve a lot of things either. Inherently, I imagine, and I've got video games to talk about, so I don't know why I'm talking about the Marvel in-game movie. I feel like all the Marvel movies are just constantly pushing their budgets as far as actual money versus just locations and number of people, and they all need to stay as smaller affairs, and otherwise it is just going to get bigger and bigger and bigger, and every failure is going to cost more and more, and eventually the movies are all going to be 3 hours and 30 minutes long, and they're going to have hundreds of people, and then you've just got the same problem that the comic books have, where the comic books, whenever there's a big crossover event in any of the comic books, they have to work really hard to have at least one panel with every character, even though the characters don't really play a role. Anyways, moving back to video games, Gamatsu has this article: Caligula 2 logo has been trademarked in Japan, which okay. Caligula, the Caligula effect, was launched on the Vita in 2016. Remake subtitled Overdose was on the PS4 in 2018, and the PS4, Switch, and PC and Steam worldwide. We can look at it. Caligula was the mature rated kind of Persona game. You can see where a lot of the characters are in these gray, black, and white outfits. If any of these screenshots will load. Let's see, I keep having to play one more game because I keep moving slower. So yeah, you have like these characters, and it goes into it's gray, black, and white, and it's very Persona-ish. Yeah, none of these screenshots want to load. What did I do to get the screenshots to work once and then never again?
Is fighting and despair all you
But
know?
yeah, it's definitely something that I should consider, and it's on my wish list. Yeah, honestly, that would make a lot of sense to. It's a 3D JRPG game. It would make a lot of sense to play this and say, hey, I'm never going to be able to play Persona. Any Atlas game is just not going to fly. So jump over to this. I think as far as the extra content is too much here. You have a swimsuit costume, casual clothes costumes. They're charging a decent amount to give characters different costumes. That's a bit of a ripoff there, but not terrible price overall, even if you get all the DLC at $30. You can see that it is mostly positive. Sexual themes is not actual nudity, so they just talk about sex. That's probably YouTube family friendly. There's a causality link. function, whatever that is, some branching paths of some sort. Yeah. And if there's going to be a sequel to it, which it seems like there is, that does now tell you that instead of being a single game, it will now potentially be a game that is the beginning of a new series, which in a lot of ways, a new series for what could potentially be a long-running JRPG series makes a lot of sense. The .hack / series of games is not worth playing at this point, but if you were to say the what is the name of that anime game series? I can't remember the name of the series I'm thinking of. Well, regardless, there's been an anime series for about 10 years that has gotten many spin-off games that is basically the same concept of .hack / and Sword Art Online is what it's called now. So if you had gotten in early on the Sword Art Online games instead of the .hack / games, you would basically have the same story anyways, and that would be something I think you could fairly appreciate. Let's do this, and then do this, and then attack there, and then that. Moving on, we have Gamatsu saying SpongeBob SquarePants Battle for Bikini Bottom Rehydrated is coming to iOS and Android on January 21st. And it probably was a little bit of effort to get the controls to work, but it definitely makes a lot more sense why they would have bothered to remaster such an old game. I doubt that this was just a reaction, that they said, oh, well, this game was not as well received as a re-release as we thought, so then we're gonna try and sell it on new platforms. I imagine this was secretly in THQ Nordic's plans all along, or Embracer Group's plans, whether it actually was part of THQ Nordic or the parent company. Gamatsu makes a point to say it's going to be without microtransactions or hidden paywalls also, which would be fairly difficult to retrofit microtransactions and paywalls into a game that old anyways. Next we have a game on Steam called Boots vs. Plants, which this kind of looks like nothing, although I will applaud the idea of putting the tutorial on the screen of the tutorial level instead of having pop-up notifications. This is 89 cents, English, French, German, with 50 achievements, which makes it seem like an achievement game. And it just visually isn't that good looking. So, no to that. Hit that. Next we have a game on Steam called Zombie Alert, which is obviously a low effort asset flip game. Early access, $2.99, English only. Let's see. I suppose the 15 days of free games from the Epic Store is done, and then the Epic Store is having trouble with their supported creator dashboards not displaying correctly. It was resolved on January 2nd, so we probably already talked about that. Let's see.
The night will be stained in blood.
Hit that.
What a
And hit
troublemaker.
that. Been sitting in a chair too long. It's 2 hours and 40 minutes. We need to hurry up. Here we have a game called Racing the Johnny, which I don't know what that stands for. I hope that's not an insult. And generally it just looks like a low effort game for $4.99 English only. It's claiming to be for early childhood. This looks pretty warped for imagery for a early childhood game, but heck, that's true for a lot of things. Let's see. Let's go ahead and put this on the field.
Circles and circles.
Do we want to play that now?
No.
Doesn't matter what we play, we'll just be done
What a troublemaker.
anyways. Next we have a game on Steam called Bad Boy Simulator, which seems like you're a student in the school and the teacher yells at you, and then you wander around in VR, and then she slips on the thing you dropped, and here you're harassing and punching people. It's like it doesn't feel like there's a real game here. And see, the thing to mention here is like Bully was a story about a kid who really wasn't that much of a bully, and it was a very bad name. Whereas this feels like a game where if you're doing anything at all, which is questionable, which it doesn't seem like you really are, it seems like you are actually acting like a bully. This is a $10.49 English only. I don't know if I fully agree with the idea of encouraging that behavior as a form of entertainment. I suppose in a lot of ways it's kind of pathetic to make the argument that you shouldn't allow people to act as bullies if they want to, when we have games where people can act as sociopathic serial spree killers, which is most first-person shooting games. So that's a bad argument. But yeah, I feel like there should probably be at least some reasoning behind it, and it should be a better experience too. If you are going to make a game where I can go postal, there should be a good experience of gameplay and at least some pathetic reason as to why, to justify why. And if you're going to make a game where I can be a bully, you need to explain that better too. And hopefully one would want to see that bullying did become a thing of only fiction, so it would potentially be something that people might engage in a video game, and only in a video game, not against other people, because it's such a obvious detestable act. That would be the ideal thought, certainly, is that, oh, this is something that doesn't actually happen in the real world. Moving on, we have a game on Steam here called Reveal, which looks like it's a card game, but the problem here is that the background is just so incredibly distracting, and it looks like MS Paint graphics. Honestly, if you'd not done the dots and not done the pink background, you might have something here. I don't know what card game this is. It seems like it's something they made up themselves, but that's kind of a problem in itself, because that probably means it's not very tested and not very good. This is $2.99 English only. That'll be a pass for me. We have about 7 more tabs, but then we also have the Steam storefront Game of the Year stuff. Here we have a game on Steam called Encounter the Light, which looks like a Chinese RPG maker game. There you have decent image as the thumbnail, and then just RPG. stuff. $3.99 Chinese only. Nothing there. Gets it to the follow list. Next we have Ghost Opera House, which looks like it's a asset flip horror game. Feels slightly Chinese focused. Requires VR. $6.99 English and Chinese. It would be weird to see a lot of Chinese developers going the route of VR, but I wouldn't be surprised if a few people try VR games more every year. Here we have a game called Vidya Poker, which is video poker, and it doesn't look terrible. Inherently, I guess the question of this is, do you really want to play video poker, particularly if you're not gambling with real money? And is this a game where you are actually not gambling with real money? It's early access, $4.79, English only, and third-party EULA. But it doesn't seem like it has any microtransactions. Seems like it also has some features designed so that you could potentially play video poker on Twitch, which I don't know why you would want to do that unless you are already just addicted to video poker and need something to put on your background while you're chatting, or maybe you're trying to be a Twitch streamer or a YouTube streamer and you literally have nothing to say, which in all fairness I often have nothing of important to say or nothing of any real value to say, but at the very least I managed to spout out some nonsense or go onto a rant. But yeah, there definitely are a lot of people that are streamers that have nothing to say at all. They just want to play a video game and have music in their background, and they can't limit their narcissism, for lack of a better term, to say, oh yeah, this isn't good content at all. There's no reason I should be streaming this. I should just be playing the game. Where, at least in my case, I literally wouldn't be playing some games, most games, if I wasn't streaming, because I'm using that as a motivator, and maybe the other people are also. But I can feel slightly superior in the fact that I can say something or have an opinion. And I do find a lot of people can't form opinions, and they're extremely boring because of it. It's like, I'm not asking for people to have the right opinion half the time. I'm just asking people to have opinions.
May you rest in peace.
Okay. That.
Did I not pray hard enough?
And then evolve that.
My blade is your salvation.
Calm thy fears, lost one.
And then hit that one.
Change your heathen
And hit
ways.
that one.
How much longer must I persist?
Moving on, Gamatsu has an article here. The Binding of Isaac Rebirth DLC Repentance launches March 31st for PC and later for consoles, featuring an immense amount of new content. They put out a trailer for it. It's like a live action trailer, so it's a little weird. Binding of Isaac still not really doing anything different as far as their visual themes. It still is the abusive mother and the crying Isaac, and here he's being locked in the cabinet, and you're seeing a lot of 3D renders of a lot of the items that existed in the game already. But yeah, there's possibly some new hints here as far as new content, but I'm not really seeing a lot of it. It's really just more of the same, and we definitely have a issue there where either you're still in love with Binding of Isaac or you've moved on, and at a certain point it's kind of hard to not tell people to just move on. I mean, if you love it, you love it, and you still want to play it. I feel like a lot of these expansions, the past 2 or 3 expansions for Binding of Isaac, were great for streamers who played Binding of Isaac and rushed through all the new content. But for actual players of the game, I think a lot of people are probably still stuck on previous expansions and haven't unlocked all the content in the game. As it is now, is just overflowing with items to the point where you just never see everything. It would be like not Salt and Sanctuary. What's the other one? It's just it's just too much at this point. I would be much happier if there was a Binding of Isaac 2 that tried to do something completely different, but then that is what The Legend of Bumbo was, and that didn't really sell. So sometimes creators really only have one successful creation in them, and a lot of times that may have nothing to do with the creator as much as it does just the audience. And honestly, if The Binding of Isaac had come out in 2020, I'm not sure people would have embraced it as much as they did when it came out in a much more happier in general time. Next, we have a game on Steam called Mix Island Remix, which looks like it's some kind of rhythm-based game. It's a little too zoomed out. It looks fairly pretty, which we haven't been able to say that from most games. A small hold and gun boss rush mini game of casual difficulty. $2.99, bunch of languages. I'm going to put this on the follow list. Guess it isn't rhythm based. It does potentially run into the problem of too much flashing neon lights though. Although I wouldn't really call these colors neon. Flashy lights. But yeah, that does look interesting. Let's do this. In the turn. Next, we have a game on Steam called Gunblocks Prologue, which looks like a Ferraria clone. Is that the name of that game? Man, it's been a while since I've thought of Ferraria. It's probably been about a week. Free to play, English only. Yeah, nothing there that interests me. I'd be much more likely to just go back and play some new map or puzzle as far as Steam is concerned. I just let that character, this guy, win because he played the card that automatically wins, but you have to go through multiple amulets, so it usually takes like 5 turns to win that, and I handed him victory. While that loads, we have a game on Steam here called Space Kettle, which is obviously just a Getting Over It with Benet Foddy clone. Early access, $3.99, English only. That's not going to make it to the following list. And yeah, once again, we have to mention Twitch support still having problems as of January 2nd. Issues with the site not loading correctly. And we're going to get more of these card packs, and I'm just not going to open them. So going forward until the next mid-expansion, I'm going to only open the old card packs. So we have like a daily victory here and 2 hours to 3.5 hours until the daily quests happen. Which, if I'm wise, I will turn that into an excuse to not play at all tomorrow or later tonight and save that up for Wednesday. Here we have a game on Steam called Quest for Runia, which looks like it's kind of nothing. Seems like you're shooting things with a staff to destroy cubes. Feels like that what they've done is just taken a simplistic cell phone game and tried to make it a VR game. $8.49, bunch of languages. See that. Then brings us to the Humble Bundle for a moment. We still have a little bit to do, but we can look at this. There's front-end web development, books from Humble Bundle,
Seems to be over.
cyber security and cryptography books. But are there any game bundles that have come out yet? No, there's 22 hours until the Codemasters 2020 Games Bundle ends. And I guess that means in a couple of days, maybe by Wednesday, we will have new bundles, new games bundles. So, yeah, Steam came out with the best of 2020 games, but the way the blog is, it just kind of links you to the most played games of 2020 or the top selling or the new releases of games. So the whole system is a little messed up here, because you have a blog here and then there's a link for top selling of 2020, new page, top new releases, which is different, top selling VR games, top early access graduates, which honestly that is an interesting thought. Then they have like most played games, where seemingly everybody has kind of doubled as far as most played games, top controller games, and then links to the old games that came out in previous years. Not a particularly great event though. Instead of making the blog, they've done this, which is much more visual. So you have your top sellers here, which, is there anything going to be amazingly surprising as far as the top sellers of 2020? No, I doubt it. Raft is still selling, even though Raft is still unfinished and they're just adding more content. Definitely still some games on sale in general that it would make some sense for me to buy if I just had more budget. Then inherently that's always a problem. I thought I bought that Command and Conquer Remastered. I wonder what happened there. Maybe I just didn't have the funding for it. Apparently some new content as far as Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Links is keeping people playing. Then you have like World of Warships, free-to-play games. Interesting that you have some free-to-play games here being considered as top selling. Conan Exiles is surprising that is still being supported. Some games like Skyrim Special Edition still going to be great sellers, which is kind of crazy. I did get Dying Light, so I have no excuse to not play that other than just timing. I'll probably play it in October. And yeah, I could get Persona 4 Gold, and maybe I would get it, but I'm still in that weird position where I'm not sure I can actually stream it. As far as new releases, then you have like the complete failure here of Marvel Avengers. There'd be no reason to play that. Where the complete failure of Cyberpunk 2077, there is reason at least to play that if it gets fixed. Or the exclusivity failure of Borderlands 3. that is now on Steam. Or the remake failures of Mafia. It's like a lot of these can be easily labeled as failures. But not all of them, certainly. There definitely are games that were new releases that make sense. And there's things that I don't even recognize, like this. Skull of the Hero Slayer. And probably is on my follow list already. Don't recognize this. One Step from Eden. And Your Grace. Dead Side. Don't recognize this game. They're breaking it down per month. But then also, there's more here. And inherently we are hitting that point where, let's just go back up to the top here. We are hitting that point where we are getting the Netflix thing. Some convenience. So let's see, here we have like a straight up adult game being in the new releases list. This isn't all the new releases, obviously. Not by a long shot. But yeah, we definitely have hit the point where they are emulating Netflix with the shelves a lot. And so you have your January category showing off some things. Here we have some more adult games, just straight up. Although, like things like Max Gentleman Sexy Businessman may not really be that explicit, where this very well might be. And it's definitely a new adventure, certainly, to see adult games on the storefront if you choose to do that. Here we have Azure Lane Crosswave. Too much of a microtransaction game there to put that on the wish list. Here was that AI game where it looked very pretty, but it seemed like there really was no game here. Here's Black Mesa. I didn't manage to buy that. That's a shame. Here we have Grand Blue Fantasy Versus, which is exactly the crossover that Shadowverse is doing right now. And there's definitely, it's just a fighting game. You know what's funny is this is the first list I have seen of games that have come out in 2020 that actually looks good and makes me feel like 2020 wasn't just a nothing burger, as it were, of content. And 100% of that is probably the visuals. Just, I'm such a visual type person that if I have to go to Wikipedia and read the titles, my eyes will just glaze over it. But if you show me a fancy picture to grab my attention, then that works. I didn't know Shantae and the Seven Sirens had come out this year. Definitely want to play that. But again, a game not really on sale during the winter sale, so that's obviously why I didn't buy that. And Gwent's free to play, but then the solo player part of it isn't free to play. That's full of microtransactions. Torchlight 3 came out, and I don't think there's a good reason to play it. It's mixed reviewed, whereas this is overwhelmingly positive, so I should get that. Although at a certain point saying I should buy something just because it's overwhelmingly positive is kind of silly. It really comes down to, do I really want to play it? Do I really have time to play it? It's this game. Hellpoint. What's funny is Death Stranding seems to have been listed in 2 different places here. This Other Side game popped up, and then I think people kind of forgot about it. Here's a Sword Art Online game. Not the most recent. It's probably the most recent one, actually. Which may make an argument not to play any of the other Sword Art Online games. The Wind Road. I don't think I've seen that one. there's this new icon here for adding to a wish list too. So they are slowly changing their design. Honestly, if we got back from the winter sale and everybody's background was this lighter blue instead of the dark blue that it normally is, that would imply that they are probably going to slowly change the backgrounds of Steam to make it look a little bit better. This game, I believe, is still in pre-production. Am I just opening images or am I opening links? I should be opening links, not images. Night of the Dead. Yeah, sometimes it's a link, sometimes it's an image. Depends if this pop-up and this JavaScript pop-up that they're doing works. And it does seem like sometimes it just does not work. We're down to September. And I imagine by the time we kind of hit September, there was a bit less progress happening there. We would have been deep into the pandemic. And if there were going to be games coming out, they would have been really big games. And I think a lot of the big games were just delayed. What this is really turning into is a great excuse to go and look at some of these games I put on the wish list or put on the follow list and say, hey, have these been reviewed enough to move them to the wish list? And then we're up to October. Amnesia Rebirth. I think that probably should be on the follow list at the very least. There's a question about like Baldur's Gate 3 too. Also, things like Squadrons though really feel like they're just habitually being listed because I just want to own all of the Steam games more than all the Star Wars games, more than I really want to play all of the Star Wars games. And let's see, we're up to November. We have Proteus. That was too much of a Doom clone for me. Fuser is like a music game. Door Kickers 2. I don't know if I really would want to play that. Nico Para Volume 4. Wait. That's probably on the follow list. Sakuna of Rice and Ruin. This is really the best point of the year. Like, going forward, I need to remember this. This is the best point to do a follow list cleanup. Either do a partial follow list cleanup now, and then a month from now or 2 months from now, clean everything else up, or do something very different. Like the Dragon Quest Definitive Edition is not as good as the original Dragon Quest game, but it has new content, so you're in a catch-22. I heard that one of the Worms games has been censored, and they just, for no good reason, they just took out all of the like taunting voice messages in one of the Worms games. And that must have been a controversy I've just forgotten about completely. So a lot of games here I don't recognize from December. I very well have been potentially just checked out. But yeah, it does seem very, very ridiculous to remove the taunting that is very distinctive and unique from the Worms game. So here we have a game called Skull the Hero Slayer. It's early access, it's overwhelmingly positive. So the problem is it's still in early access. Is that going to be the issue that we run into with all these games? Is that they're all going to be early access? Here we have Dead Side. It's a multiplayer first-person shooter that's early access. So that explains why that's not on the follow list. Here we have Some Convenience Store, which is overwhelmingly positive. Overwhelmingly positive, but it is tagged as sexual content, so let me double check these screenshots. Yeah, it seems like it is a pretty low effort, like, I wouldn't even call it a visual novel as much as you're running a simulation of a convenience store, and then you just have some anime girls that seem to show up and have some conversations. That seems to be all it is. It's $14.99 English and Korean. It is a little weird to have a Korean, or to have any story, frankly, around running a convenience store, working at a convenience store. You seem to text people and try and hit on the girls as the convenience store employee. Which, in a funny way, in Korea that might be fairly relatable. And yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if there's a lot of people that work, a lot of teenagers in particular, that work at convenience stores. So it would make a lot of sense that they would like to hit on the employees, as it were. Next we have The Wind Road. This is mostly positive lately, but mixed overall. Is it a multiplayer game? No, it's Chinese action RPG. That's what A stands for, usually. I'm going to put this back on the follow list. I think it was on the follow list, got rejected, and we will probably get rejected a second time, but I'll give it a chance. Then I did just open a picture of Rogue Legacy 2, but that's not a big deal because Rogue Legacy 2, I'm certain, is on my follow list. Next we have a game on Steam called Night of the Dead. It's very positive. Early access single player with online PvP. I don't know what is here that would have scared me off. It kind of feels like it might be a tower defense game because you're building defenses, but this is kind of in the middle ground where it feels like there might actually be some game here too. Yeah, it definitely feels like you build traps and you do a little tower defense thing. But a tower defense game in 3D is unique in itself, enough to deserve a follow, and certainly this is one of those cases where I have to secede my will to the populace and say, hey, if the public are liking this game, there must be something here worth at least checking out. And maybe I won't agree with it. Maybe I'll play the game and still hate it completely, but I'd like to at least give it a chance. Here we have Craftopia, which I don't know if there's a game here or if it's just kind of half Fortnite and half Stardew Valley and half Breath of the Wild. Kind of feels like it's all over the place. It's early access with online co-op, but it seems like it definitely feels like they're just trying to be too many different things. And yeah, it's already on the following list, but can I take it off the following list? Yeah, I think that's what I have to do. I think there's too much randomness in this game. I don't think it would be focused enough. Here we have Untitled Goose Game, which is $14.99. I have no idea why this isn't on the wish list, frankly. If I had made the decision that I did not want to play Untitled Goose Game, I definitely made a huge mistake there. Like, that was never even a thought I should have had. I can only assume that I've just dropped the ball, and that is extremely shocking on my part, because if I dropped the ball on a fairly well talked about and well known and well received game, how many other games did I drop the ball on? Was it 10, 20, 100? Like, if it was only one other game, it's not a big deal. If it was 100, that's a huge deal. I doubt it was 100. Next, we have a game on Steam here called Medieval Dynasty, which looks like it's a fantasy, kind of like Skyrim type game. It's early access, single player. Build and survive and hunt in the harsh Middle Ages. I feel like the problem with this game is, unless they're going to throw in some monsters or some storyline, this really feels like a simulator of living in a pretty bad time. So I don't know why I would want to live that experience. Then it's missing the thing that makes Skyrim interesting, which is the fact that you are dragonborn and there are dragons. Like, yeah, this just feels like a survival crafting game. And see, that drops the ball on the success of something like Minecraft, because Minecraft is not successful because you can simulate the experience of living in the wild. It's successful because they've completely watered down what the amount of effort and time it would be to craft anything, and they let you build things in an amazing short amount of time, often with magical concepts. Next, we have Captain Tsubasa, which is very positive lately, but mixed overall. See, that puts you in a weird position. I wish this succeeded and was better received, but it's not. Because this would be basically the only kind of soccer game I'd like to play, is something that is super crazy and built around an anime and has that wild, crazy anime to it. But I think the problem is probably that the game doesn't actually play that well. Amnesia Rebirth should be on the fall list, unless I'm just admitting to myself I don't want to play any of the Amnesia games. I don't even know why I'm putting it on the fall list. Just put it on the wish list. Like, maybe I don't want to ever cover any of the Amnesia games, but at the moment I can't make that decision. Baldur's Gate 3 has partial nudity. I wouldn't have expected that. It's very positive, but it's early access, so it should be on the fall list. Man, I must have gone a little too crazy on this fall list cleanup, because there definitely are some games here that I don't think I should have rejected. And inherently, that is the problem with doing a fall list that's so incredibly large, is that I may just be emotionally exhausted by the time I play a game. I look at a game on the wish list or fall list, because it's way down in the S's or T's, and I've spent hours and hours and hours going through the A's and the B's and the C's, and so my decisions may inevitably be corrupted by that. So if anything, maybe I should go around in random order, but that doesn't really work, and it doesn't even really matter, because the things I accept or reject this year will be different games next year. But I guess I just need to be a little bit more generous. Possibly. Maybe not. Maybe it doesn't matter in the long run. It's not like I have a shortage of games. Noida here is the physics-based game that honestly just never looks interesting to me. It's on the following list, but I don't... I've still had a hard time trying to figure out how I could justify playing it. We have about 10 more things. Door Kickers 2 is really a question about Door Kickers 1. It's on the fall list already. Yeah, I don't know if I want to play Door Kickers 1. Nico Para is tagged sexual content, so let's not show that until I look at it. Make sure it's YouTube family friendly. Volume 4 of Nico Para here. The cat girls in a cafe visual novel. Cute anime thing. It's tagged as cute. So, the Nico Para series still going strong. Sakuna of Rice and Rain. Overwhelmingly positive. Why is it not on the wish list? Why would I have decided not to do it? Farming sim. That might have been it. in part. How did I drop the ball so much here? Like, why is this not on the following list, or why is this not on the wish list? Like, this was a game that was talked about a lot. So what happened there? See, and I definitely don't have time to go back and watch my own fall list cleanups to try and remind myself what my thinking pattern was. It's a hack and slash game with farming sim implications too. Maybe that implies that the farming was too much of a focus and the hack and slash was bad. But if those were the case, then why is that not reflected in any of the reviews? So yeah, that needs to be on the wish list. It could be that some of these are just deluxe editions exist and that's the issue. So I may very well be putting the non-deluxe editions of games on the wish list instead, but we can't be assured of that, not easily. Here we have Dragon Quest 11 Definitive Edition, overwhelmingly positive. And the question was definitely the other Dragon Quest game, the non-definitive edition. Was that the one you wanted better? The definitive edition, unfortunately, is not the actual definitive edition. It has de nouveau in it, but I haven't ever specifically said I wouldn't play a game with de nouveau. I would be upset about it, certainly, if it ran badly, but like, that's not a major concern for me. This is like overwhelmingly positive. I don't see any reason not to put it on the wish list. I think you have to play the definitive edition if you're going to play one anyways. Worms Rumble here. I don't even recognize this game. So must have been relatively new. It's a real-time Worms game, which maybe means it's multiplayer only. Yeah, it's online PvP. Which that explains why I wouldn't have put it on the fall list, is because I just am not going to play against random people and have a good time. Here we have Suzerain. It's on the fall list. It's very positive. Seems like it's a finished product. It's English only, since we're seeing it here. Let's see. Text-based roleplay game, navigate the political drama. Yeah, I can see why that's on the following list, just because it's a text-based game. It's nice visuals, certainly, but text-based is kind of a crazy sell. And then Haven, we have on the following list, and I guess at this point, might as well just go on the wish list, since it's very positive. It meets the 30 reviews, and certainly for any slightly promoted game, even a AA or single A game, if it's even slightly promoted or slightly popular, a game like this will get over 30 reviews of, and will be mostly positive. It's only for the incredibly small, nothing games nobody's ever heard of that you run into a problem of it not getting enough reviews and thus just being irrelevant. You have Shiren the Wanderer, Tower of Fortune, Dice of Fate, which looks like a nicely visually polished roguelike is what they're calling it. Looks kind of like an RPG to me. Mostly positive. Again. Yeah, I can see why this is on the fall list. Now I'm going to have to at some point make a difficult decision as to would I be willing to play a game that looks like this or not. Here we have that game Morbid and the Seven Acolytes. This just came out in December. I remember this. And My only real problem with this was that the graphics looked a little bit blurry because of their art style, but I don't even see that now, so maybe they sharpened up the images in the screenshots. Interesting. Well, we can put that on the wish list, even though it has only 171 reviews. That definitely is a game lots of people could have been spending their time playing throughout December. Here we have Monster Sanctuary, which is Monster Taming meets Metroidvania. Very positive. Is it early access? No. Okay, that looks good. Put that on the wish list too. It's fairly easy to put a game that was marked as one of the best games or best sellers of 2020 and put that on the wish list, because that justifies your decisions very easily, whereas other games on the fall list that aren't getting mentioned as a bestseller or best one of the best new releases still have that problem. Here we have something that looks a lot like Myst, if Myst was made by a different company. And how did I miss this one? Came out December 8th. Single player, English, full audio. I feel like maybe I've worked on my server too much at this point. I'm going to have to blame it on being distracted with working on my server as to why a game like this exists and I didn't have it on the fall list. I mean, I can literally just jump it to the wish list. It definitely looks like something I want to play. As a big fan of Myst. And then I believe that's, let's see, if we go back here, I believe that was the top sellers and the new releases. And then if you were to go back to like most played, I feel like there's less of a argument to say, well, here's a game that a lot of people played, but somehow I've skipped it. Like this game, Eternal Return Black Survival. Never heard of it, but it's a free-to-play MOBA, so what does that really matter? Or Tabletop Simulator. I've heard of it all over the place. I know it exists. I just haven't gotten around to buying it. Black Desert Online, great example of that too. And being most played does not really work well. And then you have like the early access graduates, which it does feel like Steam can potentially push some people to come out of early access by promoting early access graduates. Honestly, they probably should do that every quarter, every sale, every month even, to say, hey, these games just came out of early access. Let's give you a little bit of promotion. Although inherently that then just promotes more people to be in early access to begin with. That way they can get more promotion from Steam. And it doesn't really solve the issue. Last Evil came out of early access. That's a little surprising. And Visage is a horror game that came out of early access. For as many low effort early access games that get released in early access, very few ever actually come out of it. Then we have some VR games. Here we have VR Kanojo, which the best of VR here probably is just almost every game in VR. Where like Arizona Sunshine might be decently good, Pavlov VR may be terrible. See if we can see anything. There's a subtitle update for Job Simulator. The Room VR. I really wish that wasn't in VR, so I could play it. Fallout 4 in VR, Rick and Morty VR. These are not all games that came out this year, and it does make an interesting argument if there will be much of a different list next year. We have VR Paradise, a adult game in VR. And then here's a pretty bad one. Frames per second stat counter for VR. And that was labeled as the best one probably because people want to use it as a tool, not as a game. But overall here you have very, very little that you'd want to play in VR, or that was good in VR. Let's see, a graffiti game in VR, Tilt Brush by Google in VR. Then controller games is a unique breakdown for that, because that really is an old school way of thinking to say, oh yeah, there's a big difference between games that support controllers now compared to the games that are only mouse and keyboard. There's almost no games that come out these days that don't support controller support of some sort, although it did allow them to, say, highlight Code Vein here, which otherwise is just not going to get any highlight. So it's an interesting argument, but honestly it should probably be broken down even more to like Xbox controller support versus PlayStation controller support, and there aren't any real games that support PlayStation controller, so that doesn't really work. So yeah, this game, Eternal Return Black Survival, is seemingly a top-down action game, some anime characters that you select, but it's online PvP with in-app purchases, and it doesn't look anything very interesting. Last Evil has sexual content and nudity, and it's just straight up a sex game, and it definitely says you're only seeing this because you marked that you wanted to see adult only content. And yeah, apparently it is out of early access. They're not going to put any more content into it. It's $7.99 for Last Evil, and it does feel like they put in some new stuff. It also feels like a game that I just could not really play on Steam. So I could put it on the wish list, and I'll have to think about that, certainly. But if I was going to cover it, I could only just like talk about it, and that's pretty much it. It's a card-based game where you're playing as a succubus, and the cards are sexual in nature, and the certain cards seem to put the main character in different poses. Which, it's an interesting thought, certainly, instead of just making your standard visual novel adult game. Next we have Visage, which is on the following list. It's a survival horror game. It's very positive, so I think it's probably easy enough to say put this on the wish list. Although, do I really need horror games? No, particularly psychological horror games. And then here's Rogue Legacy 2, which is still in early access and was on the fall list. I clicked on that just to make sure. And alright, that will bring us back, 3 hours and 30 minutes. We went extra long today, and we really, really failed to get any victories. I think it is going to be quite a while still where we can get like treasure chests, like January 8th. So if I had gotten some more victories, I would have gotten some more treasure chests, but I don't think I'm really missing out on anything specific. So let me go down my Twitter feed and see if there was any new news in the past 3 hours and 30 minutes. As far as things to talk about. Apple has removed 39,000 games from the App Store in China, which, okay, makes sense. China had said pretty much that they weren't going to allow games unless they approved them, and I bet there were a lot of games on the Apple App Store before these rules went into play, and now. TechCraft has an article, you could be in a NPC in Pokemon Go Tour Kanto. So apparently they're doing some kind of contest. I'll let you look up that article if it interests you. Probably the answer is you have to be Japanese. And probably live in the Kanto area of Japan and really know a lot about the Kanto area of Japan. Let's see what else. Lego Island developers reportedly never received bonus pay, according to TechRaptor. Which, wouldn't be surprised about that. Lego Island, I think, is one of a very old Lego game, though. So I think that would have been before TT Games. But if it isn't, then that's weird. I watched the No Clip documentary talking to the Double Fine guy in charge, and there were a couple games they mentioned that Double Fine published or made that I'd forgotten even existed. But otherwise, he doesn't really have a lot to say. Which, of course, he's not going to say much since he's the guy in charge and he's now owned by Microsoft. Anyways, to wrap up, Cyberpunk 2077 Judy male romance has been unlocked with a mod, which so apparently the sexual orientation of your allies wasn't always set in stone, which is weird. I guess that means that in the main story, Judy, who I assume is this character, is a lesbian, which honestly, in the Cyberpunk universe, as the way they were selling it and explaining it, I kind of felt like everybody would just be bisexual because everybody is changing and modding and cyberpunking their bodies anyways. So at that point, does it make any sense for anybody to have any kind of sexual preference? I mean, but yeah, it's very possible though that this is content that they were gonna put in some DLC. It's also possible that it was just content that didn't get fully finished. Then they released a game on Steam here called Hexahedral Pathfinder, which looks like basically nothing, just a block pushing game. $2.99, English only. And then, well, 2 more tabs and then we're done. Here, TechRaptor, Lego Island developers reportedly never received bonus pay. So this is like a YouTube channel where somebody's going to talk about it for 55 minutes. And it seems like it is just talk behind a single background screen. Okay, well, accusations have been made. I wouldn't be surprised. It seems fairly common for that to happen. Here we have a game called Hieroglyph Prologue, which looks like a demo for a game that maybe if it was slightly more visually polished I'd be interested in, but it isn't. It's $1.59, English only. It's weird to have demos that cost money. Alright, well, that's going to be it for this stream. We've gone really long. As always, I ask you to like, share, subscribe, comment, and watch every second of my videos. If you want a friend or follow me on any social media sites, there's a whole bunch of links down below. And if you want to support me further, there's a link to Patreon, or you can friend me on Steam and gift me a game off my wishlist. Thank you for watching. Have a good evening.